Okay, we are live now. So I will stick to this page. First of all, look, thank you very much joining on a pretty busy Sunday schedule. And I think I know everybody's busy, and we've all got our personal commitments, our professional commitments, और पता नहीं कौन कौन सी कमिटमेंट्स हैं और उसके ऊपर फिर संडे मेरी तरफ तो यहाँ संडे हो चुका है ऑस्ट्रेलिया में मुझे नहीं पता अमेरिका में बर्तानिया में सऊदी अरब में और कनाडा में क्या वक्त हो रहा है तो थैंक यू वेरी मच वेर एवर यू आर इन वॉट एवर टाइम जोन यू आर थैंक यू हम्बल्ड बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया तो साहब आज का जो मकसद है कॉन्वर्सेशन का वो बड़ा सादा और बड़ा सिंपल सा है वी आर ऑल इंटरनेशनल मेडिकल ग्रेजुएट्स अच्छा हाँ एक बात डिस्क्लेमर वो ये कि हम बात वो करेंगे जो समझ में आए अब वो अंग्रेजी में समझ में आती है तो लोग कह सकते हैं कि प्लीज गो इंग्लिश दे कैन कमेंट इन आवर comment section in the Facebook live or they can also comment through our Zoom and if they want us to talk in उर्दू में बात करना चाहते हैं हम फ्लक्चुएट करते रहेंगे ताकि ज्यादा लोगों को बात समझ में आती रहे और मुझे तो वैसे भी उर्दू बोलने का मौका चाहिए होता है सॉरी फॉर दैट तो आई थिंक यासिर भाई जो है वो भी ऐसा ही महसूस करते हैं थोड़ी सी मुस्कुराहट आ गई उनके चेहरे पे बिल्कुल और जफर भाई आज आपको बोलनी पड़ेगी और इमाद तो जहां मेजोरिटी है वो फिर मेजोरिटी के साथ चलते हैं तो भाई आज का टॉपिक जो है वो बहुत सिंपल सा है हम तमाम लोग जो हैं वो इंटरनेशनल मेडिकल ग्रेजुएट्स हैं और तमाम के तमाम लोग we have been through some sort of a story. It might be a professional turmoil, professional challenges in terms of our exams, licensing exams, membership exams, fellowship exams, training when we did training in Pakistan or wherever we're coming from, in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or whatever we come from. And then personal challenges. क्या personal level पे हमको challenges पेश आए? क्या वो फैक्टर्स थे जिन्होंने हमको ये मजबूर किया या इन्फ्लुएंस किया रादर कि हमको पाकिस्तान को छोड़ के जाना है और हमने बाहर जाके अपनी विलायत जाके हमने अपनी ट्रेनिंग मुकम्मल करनी है तो वो क्या हमारे जो थे इंडिविजुअल फैक्टर्स थे उसके ऊपर थोड़ा सा बात करेंगे तो इसमें आप अपनी पर्सनल स्टोरीज बहुत ज्यादा पर्सनल नहीं हो जाएगा यानी कि within reality but not too much real not too much information struggle over the years professionalism personal uh, and maybe I think times are difficult for IMGs there's no point denying that international medical graduates are struggling I graduated long time ago and when I came up obviously the circumstances now have changed drastically and I think with our stories now we're going to be narrating like 4 or 5 stories maybe one person or two people may find some relevance to their own story if you tell your story in a good way I think something with someone will resonate so let's try to do that so the structure of the workshop is going to be very simple we'll do a little bit of an introduction we'll share our personal and professional stories, and then we'll go through the questions from the audience if there are any questions, mainly on sort of general aspects of training, professionalism, and so forth. So without further ado, Assalamu alaikum. बहुत बहुत आपको वेलकम खुशामदीद सबका आने का लेट्स स्टार्ट विद यासिर भाई क्योंकि मेरे स्क्रीन के बिल्कुल बीच में यासिर भाई हैं यासिर भाई कुछ अपना तारुफ दीजिएगा आप
Walaikum assalam and assalamu alaikum to the rest of the public. Yasir Qureshi from Pakistan, originally from Karachi to be more exact. And I'm a consultant in emergency medicine. I have been practicing in Saudi for the last 4 years, but I actually trained in UK from the Yorkshire School of Emergency Medicine in emergency medicine. So I got my CCT from there and was practicing as a consultant there for a few years before making another transition to move to Saudi Arabia for a career move and for other reasons which we will discuss hopefully during the webinar. And I feel proud to have graduated from Pakistan from Sindh Medical College. But that was more than 2 decades ago. Still does not make me that old. Alhamdulillah,
That's it.
all in the same lot. So that's where I started my training from, and then moved on to UK in search of the greener pastures, as most of us all do. But we don't realize that grass is always greener on the other side.
Now hold that thought. Hold that thought, Rasif bhai. I think this is getting way too interesting for me. Zafar bhai, please oblige us with your presence and with your larger than life personality.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you so much, John, for having me. This is nice to be part of this forum. So I'm Zafar Qasim. I'm currently consultant or attending physician in emergency medicine as well as critical care in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, US. I've been in Philadelphia now. This is my 4th year, but I've been in the US since 2012. But I'm a 2001 graduate from Bakai University in Karachi, from Karachi. My path has been quite interesting and long, taken me from Karachi to England and then onwards to US. So we can get into details
Isn't
later
that
on.
great? Like you have been through the machinery. Jabin, I should have said ladies first, but my apologies. Please.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Rizwan. Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning to whoever is in Pakistan attending and where the morning is. It's Jabin here. I am staff physician or consultant at the pediatric emergency medicine at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, Canada. I have also graduated and originally from Pakistan, Karachi. I have graduated from in 2000 from DMC, and there's a recently 75th anniversary of DMC, so proud DMCN. Then I did, basically I worked till 2013 in Aga Khan University as a consultant there in pediatric emergency medicine, then to Middle East, Oman, worked there as a senior consultant. And then 4 years back, I moved to Canada. And then since then, I'm working at SickKids.
Okay, excellent. That looks like a very well-rounded experience altogether. Imad, I think Imad and me go hand in hand. He does not need any introduction. So no, I'm joking. Imad, please.
No, Rizwan, I insist. You go first, please.
I'm just a host right now. I'll come to my introduction later. I can sit here for hours and ends. So please, without further ado,
I want you to go first so that I can stop you in between.
Imad has always been a baton charger of a policeman. It stops me where I need to be stopped. He's been. So my name is Rizwan Qureshi. And yes, it's been a long journey. 20 years on the clock, I think. 2001 DMC, Dow Metal College graduate. So yes, in that I do rub shoulders with Zafar. So yes, we are both from 2001. I think you may remember Hamad. He's my classmate from 2001. Zainab, I think. Salman, I know some of the people. And Ale, I think from Bakai. If they're listening to this video somehow, somewhere, then that is also. So yes, 2001 Dow Metal graduate, did my initial training in Pakistan, then moved to the UK and finally to Australia. Did my fellowship and now working as a consultant here in Wollongong Hospital, Shell Harbour Hospital and Liverpool Hospital. So a good mix again in 2 countries, and then establishing close route to Pakistan through personal reasons. My family, Ammi is still there. My sister is still there. But then also over the last few years, as most of our audience would know, through emergency focus. And that's how I've really grown my emergency focus family over the years. And mind you, Imad, on the clock, this is our 3rd anniversary. I won't say wedding anniversary, but emergency focus is 3 years old.
Yes,
now you
absolutely.
take on.
Okay, right, everybody. So, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Imad Qureshi. I am the only person in this group who is not from Karachi and did not graduate in Karachi.
But you're
So
still welcome.
I still have to go every year because Rizwan, my work husband, takes me there against all my wishes. Um, so I am from Muzaffarabad, which is the capital of Azad Kashmir, and I have grown up and spent most of my childhood and my younger years in Saudi Arabia. After that, I managed to get into Army Medical College in Rawalpindi, and I joined Army Medical in 2000 when some of you were already graduates and some were close to graduating. But through a very quick turnaround, I graduated in 2004 in 4 years and a bit. And after that, I finished my house job and I went back to Saudi. So I'm one of the few people who's gone from Pakistan to Saudi and then has gone to the UK, whereas most people do it the other way around. They go to the UK, they get their passports, their license, their citizenships, they get their degrees, and then they come to the Middle East. But I had to go back because my parents are still living in Saudi Arabia, despite having gone there for 2 years in 1981.
Excellent.
Um,
Excellent.
And in 2014, I came to the UK. I worked as an emergency medicine specialist in Saudi Arabia from 2007 until 2014, 2015. And then in 2014, I came to the UK. And I have completed my FRChem. I am an associate fellow of the Faculty of Intensive Care Medicine, and I'm trying to maintain my ties with Pakistan. So I think 2018, I went to Pakistan 6 times. In 2019, I went to Pakistan 5 times. 2017, I think I went 8 times. But 2020 has been a real blast. So we've not been able to go anywhere. That's
Okay.
very quickly about me, and let's keep going.
Okay, so the structure of the workshop, again, I'll repeat for the new participants. We've gone through the introduction of the faculties. Thank you all very much. And I think uh, there's no need in sort of repeating the fact that we do represent a very well-rounded sort of Pakistani background and backgrounds from the US, UK, Middle East, Canada, and Australia, of course. Now, swiftly, we're going to move on to our questions. So the first question, I may start with Dr. Zafar Qasim, is tell me, Dr. Zafar Qasim, what made you decide to leave Pakistan and pursue your career outside Pakistan? What were the factors? What were the personal factors? What were the professional inspirations or whatever it was? Tell me and be honest. Everybody would love an honest response.
It's a really good question. Part of it is really based around the specialty interest that I had, which was emergency medicine. And even now in Pakistan, emergency medicine is just starting to really be developed. But certainly in 2000, 2001, there was really no emergency medicine and no opportunity to train in emergency medicine at all in Pakistan. And so, I have a short attention span. I like the specialty. So I had to look elsewhere for opportunities to train in that. But it was a difficult choice to make for a couple of reasons, because I was interested in a way to see how we could eventually develop the specialty in Pakistan. And I'd been in touch with a few people, 1 or 2 people who had been outside before and were pursuing this. So they were my kind of mentors and guides for this. But they said that they advised me that there's no opportunity right now in Pakistan to do this. So you have to go abroad and see what the opportunity is there. So that was my main reason for leaving. But I didn't leave right away. I did 1 year house job at Aga Khan, and then in the meanwhile was doing my overseas exams to get a position overseas. So that was my reason for leaving.
Okay, so your reason, summarizing, was that you were always thinking of emergency medicine. You wanted to train in emergency medicine so you can influence the development of this very new field in Pakistan through your links, professional links, personal links. And I think that's a very good thought. And I think somebody has to take that step, because once you're introducing something new in your country, you need to learn from the best. And I think that's probably the road of reflection. When you go on, you learn, you experience, and so forth. Yasir bhai, what was your katha? Aapki kya kahani hai?
Yeah, there were quite a lot of factors. I'm also from the same time that Qasim has just talked about. So yeah, I was more interested in the surgery, and in those days, I'm from the 93 to 99 batch, whichever way you can take it. Some parts of the world take it as the starting time, and so I'm the graduate from the 99. And at that time, many of my colleagues who were interested in medicine, they were planning to go to the States, still sitting their MLE exams. But those who were interested in the surgery would think of the UK and take the PLAB route to go for the MRCS and then think of the FRCS. And it was always my dream to pursue surgery and get my fellowship from the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. That was the aim at that time. And unfortunately, there were no other options available. I mean, that's the dilemma. Like in our intermediate level, either you take pre-medical or pre-engineering, and if you can't get into, then it means कि लड़के के अच्छे मार्क्स नहीं आए होंगे तो वो आर्ट्स कर रहा है या इकोनॉमिक्स कर रहा है. Although the MBAs and the IT computer specialists tended to earn a bit more than the medical specialists. So anyhow, my aim was to basically get surgical higher degree, higher training, as I was saying, and that prompted me to move towards UK. There were other factors as well. I mean, that was just the training bit, but obviously, for अब आपने कहा था ना honest रहना है, तो for the money as well. I mean,
absolutely.
I believe that all of us belong to the culture where we are supported by our parents for a long time. शादी भी हो जाती है तो आप घर पे ही रह रहे होते हैं joint family system के नाम पे. Or I was lucky to be living with my parents, and I had my own Yamaha and all that. But लेकिन Yamaha में petrol डलवाने के पैसे भी नहीं, so you have to move out. So when I started my training, JPMC at Jinnah Hospital, it used to be in those times free training. Like we had to pay the hospital to provide us the training. So most of the colleagues were working full-time shift at the Jinnah Hospital in the surgery. And in the evening, we would be doing part-time jobs in other hospitals or working in the clinics, helping out other people to make both ends meet. So it could not continue for more. Even I had passed my FCPS 1 and I was pursuing my training or so. But having done 2 years of that, I thought that I can't carry on like this for the next few years. So I should move out, get the better degree from abroad, and then come back and serve the country and maybe drive a Honda or an Accord at that time. Yeah, that was it.
Fair enough.
So surgery and money.
Of course, of course. Now, I know. I think I can personally relate to your story. I think that really hits home with me. That they were pretty much my reasons as well. Jabin, your reasons of moving overseas.
So basically, when I was doing, interestingly, as Yasser was saying, Emerge was not my first choice. And even I was not aware anything of like that exists because we don't have any emergency at the time when we graduated. So my FCPS Part 2 thesis was in thalassemia. So I am in love with hematology. I used to do hematology and my plan was to join hematology in Aga Khan University because that's the only place which is offering this fellowship. So I finished my residency in November and they usually do interviews in April, May. So somebody suggested that there's an emergency department in Aga Khan, which give jobs to bekar people like us who have done not doing anything as a locum, and you can see pediatric patients there. And I said, okay, why to, like as Yasser was saying, our residency was also unpaid and we started to be paid in the last year. And in the final year of my residency, I have to give the entry test for pediatric residency to qualify to get the pay for last 1 year and to get it
Amazing.
by Dean Dr. Masood Hamid, and he did a special signature and he said, I'm allowing you specially to get, I said, sir, please, I have worked 3 years unpaid. Can you give me 1 year at least paid? So he said, okay, just go ahead. I'm signing your letter. So this is how, and when I started working in emergency, I really loved it. I said, no, I don't think so. I want to do any more hematology because I don't like the oncology part of it. So then I decided it's going to be emergency. And then I started to explore. There was nothing at that time. Then we developed a new, like a section of pediatric emergency medicine. I think Dr. Junaid Razak was there in his leadership, and we continue to work. I worked there for 5 years and then promoted from senior medical officer to assistant professor. And then I worked a lot to establish this subspecialty into Pakistan. I went everywhere through the forum of PPA, and wherever I go, everybody asks, what training do you have? You are the most junior person. How come you will establish this specialty? That will let me think that despite of me having all these expertise, if I don't have a fellowship or a training, it is not going to give me or put me in a position that I will establish this subspecialty. That's the point where I start thinking about and looking at the opportunities. And then meanwhile in Middle East, they were in the way of planning or establishing an emergency department and pediatric emergencies. So I thought if I move there and then will look for more fellowships, it might help me. So it's basically the kind of more training. And it's just like I don't have a training, so I don't have a say. So I should get more training. And then later on, I have some of my personal and family needs. Being single mom, I have to support everybody. So that's led me to move to Canada.
Excellent, excellent. I think that sort of really overlaps with the factors between Dr. Zafar and Dr. Yasir as well. Imad, please share some thoughts.
I thought we'd established an order as one.
Oh, yes. The order is in non-order. That's the only order.
Fine, not a problem. So I did my house job in 2 hospitals in Pakistan after I graduated in 2004. The first one was in Capital Hospital in Islamabad.
So I think the question is, Imad, and I think I'll just remind you the question, what were the factors that made you pursue post-graduation outside Pakistan? Now, there could be personal factors or professional factors, but go on, please.
Right. No, absolutely. I was just giving a little bit of background into it because I hadn't done emergency medicine up until I came to Saudi Arabia. So I'd done my house job in orthopedics, in general surgery, in urology, general medicine, neurology, hepatology, gastroenterology, and intensive care. And this was about 15 months. And after that, I came to Saudi Arabia because that's where my parents were. And that's where I had imagined that I would be looking after my parents, so to say, but actually just freeloading in their house. But so I came to Saudi and I spent a few months looking for a job. I ended up getting a job in emergency medicine. And the first day I walked into that department and I worked there, I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. There's nothing else I'd rather. And that's how I came to Saudi Arabia. And I spent a good 8-9 years there with no plans to move out until I realized that I've probably gained all that I could staying in Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, they've got such a shortage of training slots that it's almost impossible for a non-Saudi to get a training slot. Now, a lot of people look at that and they say that, that's very unfair. They don't train, expatriates or foreigners or people who've come to Saudi from outside. But the simple fact is, even if you're in the UK, for example, you would apply for a training post in the second or third round. After all, the UK graduates and the EU graduates have had an opportunity to apply. In Saudi, all the posts are filled when the first round of applicants apply. About 5 to 10% of Saudis at that time didn't get training slots because there weren't enough in the country. So Self-trained myself, worked in emergency medicine for 8 or 9 years, and then realized that if I have to grow, if I have to learn more, I'm going to have to move out. And that's how I came to the UK with a plan to finish my FRChem.
Beautiful. I think that's a very insightful and thoughtful process, that you were actually quite satisfied in the area where you're working, but it was the hunger and the pursuit of the better future and better training. For me, I think I sort of resonate a bit from each one of you. For me, the formula was very simple. I think, in fourth year and final year. In fact, let me go back a little bit, but not in detail. I was actually pretty sure that medical college is only a temporary phase for me to go overseas. I was very clear about it. And the reason I had this in my mind is because I wanted to provide for myself and my family. Financial reasons were very important for me. And somehow I thought that I think staying in Pakistan, doing the postgraduate training, being a doctor, I might not be able to provide in as quicker manner, in as substantial manner, if I do while I can actually do my training overseas. So that was my prime motivation, even before I entered the medical college, Dow Medical College. And I think it was about fourth and final year, I was pretty switched on that, look, I want to train in certain specialty. I wasn't clear about which specialty, but I knew that it has to be surgical specialty of some sort. I think in fourth and final year, I was more interested toward surgery. And then I did my PLAB. And after the PLAB, we sort of moved to the UK. So my personal reasons for choosing was primarily financial. The professional reasons were many. When I was training as a house officer in Civil Hospital Karachi, through the 4 rotations of neurosurgery, surgery, neurology, and general medicine, it was very obvious that our system lacks resources to properly train junior doctors. There was no organized structured training or teaching for house officers. There was no information. I'm talking about 2001 and 2002. There was a paucity of information as to what avenues are available for me for postgraduate training in Pakistan. What are the financial options? And as I think Yasir Bhai have just said to me, I saw postgraduates working with me free of cost in a hospital. And I thought, I cannot really do that. I cannot afford to do that. So this is not really something which I can commit to. So done with the PLAB, moved over to the UK, and rest, I think, is history. We just sort of kept on with the flow. I think the emergency sort of lent its way to me. I enjoyed working in emergency. I did do some surgical rotations in the UK, but I think it was emergency which sort of gave me a more independence of working environment. And I still remember my one night. I actually like to tell this instance. Maybe I think I was doing first night in St. Peter Hospital in Ashford, and I was, I think, 2 years out from medical college. So I was like a first year resident, and it was so busy and so crazy. And all the doctors and registrars who were working with me, they were all busy in recess, and I had the waiting room full of patients, like 30. I said, what to do right now? And I actually went to the tea room and just slept for 5 minutes and came on more rejuvenated and trashed the waiting room. And I thought, I really like that approach. I can actually do that for the rest of my life, no questions. So that was my professional motivation and personal reasons. Moving on to the next question, I'll start with Dr. Zafar. And I think we have partly answered that question already, that why did you choose emergency? But let me extend that question, Zafar. I'm not going to let you go easy on that. If you were given an opportunity, again, now that you're totally established, you've got, a professional front and you've got a certain repute following you. But if you were ever given an opportunity, and be honest, would you do something differently? Now, I think there are lots of people who would like to know, if they're considering emergency medicine now, would you advise them that emergency medicine is not really the field or if that's the thing. I think it's very personal. There could be professional reason. But what about you? If you're given an opportunity, would you train in emergency medicine again or a different field? And what would be your advice for young generation like
Yeah, I
me?
think it's a great question because some people emergency medicine is always, it started off as the reputation that, oh, if you couldn't get into anything else, you ended up in the emergency department, and so it always had this reputation that you failed somewhere. And actually, it's interesting because in the U.S. at least, the emergency medicine is one of the most competitive specialties to get into, and it. What I enjoy about it is the variety that I see. I can see a neonate all the way up to a 90-year-old person, and understand what to do for them, at least in the first few hours. When my colleagues from other specialties will be, they'll be taken aback about, oh my gosh, how are you going to deal with this problem? So I like the variety. So I really enjoy that aspect of it. And because of that reason, I can be going at 110% with a really sick patient to, going nice and slow with somebody who has maybe a pulled elbow or something, and just really make that a very satisfying recovery from that for that child and stuff. So I like that variety. So for me, if I had to do it again, I'd still go into emergency medicine. And then personally, I also did critical care, so I do like the hyper acute stuff as well, and a little bit of the a little bit longer term than what we see in the emergency department. So it was a nice balance for me to be able to do both fields, and it gives me an opportunity to keep myself ahead of the field in terms of resuscitation. And also allows some unique opportunities, I think, in areas where, like Pakistan, where there is such growth now happening and such opportunity for growth to bring something new. Everybody knows that their uncle or their, jo bhi rishtedar, or they're a surgeon, or they're this, they're a cancer specialist. But what happens when they're sick at 10 o'clock in the night? They all go to the emergency room, and
That's
then
right.
who is there? So it's important that the person who sees that person in Pakistan in the emergency department is someone who knows what they're doing. And so to take this specialty that's so young in the world in general, and even younger in Pakistan, and have an opportunity to be able to help shape that, even in a small way, is very satisfying. So for all those reasons, I'd say yes to your question. I'd do it again.
No, I think that's very well put, and I think that resonates with me as well. Sorry, I'm taking a bit of an order jump here again. That I often ask myself a question: that if I was to have a cardiac arrest in the middle of the night, the same example that you were doing, and I'm rushed into an emergency department, who would I like to be resuscitated by? Would it be a cardiologist, or would it be an emergency physician? 100% it has to be an emergency physician, because I don't think the cardiologists are trained to do CPR and advanced life support as aptly, as professionally as we are. Moving on to Yasir Bhai.
Oh, we are
Yasir
keeping
Bhai,
okay.
the same question. So, you've already said that you were sort of surgically influenced, and your factors coming to emergency department, I couldn't really understand. What was your reason to actually drift from, surgery to emergency? And would you like to do over again? Or honestly, I sometimes actually ask the question to parents like you and me: would you want your son or a daughter to train in emergency medicine? Because there's a bit of a hierarchy, almost like the political dynasties, that like father was a famous neurosurgeon, then the son becomes the same neurosurgeon, and the grandson becomes the same neurosurgeon, ophthalmologist, or general surgeon. It's almost like a dynasty.
Yeah,
Nascent it may be, but what would you think? What your thoughts might be on that one?
well, just responding to your second part of the question, that would I want my children to become emergency physicians? To be honest, I didn't even want them to pursue medicine. It's not that I am not satisfied with what I do, but I want them to pursue what they feel content by. I mean, that would be my message to the IMGs as well. Do what you feel is best for you rather than what your peers feel might be best for you. However, both of my kids want to pursue medicine. Third one is a bit younger, so I don't know about her. So yes, I was more inclined towards surgery, maybe because of peer pressure. Family, friends, everybody would say, oh yeah, look at him, he's a surgeon, he's a neurosurgeon, he's a cardiac surgeon, etc. And that's what prompted me to take my FCPS Part 1 in surgery. I was lucky to be working with the renowned names at the time, Professor Irshad Wahid at JPMC, Professor Mumtaz Meher, you might have heard about them. Then I also trained at Bakai with Professor Irshad Wahid. And then when I passed my Federal Public Service Commission exam, so I got the paid job then. Yes, then I was not, I did not have to work at the other hospital, Darus Sihat, etc. Then I was working with Professor Rashid Juma. So I had the opportunity to work with the big names in the surgical field at the time, like who wouldn't know Mumtaz Meher from Lap Kohli and Whipples, etc. And Rashid Juma is name in his own. He doesn't need any introduction. But when I moved to UK in search of the greener pastures and got through my surgical post, it used to be six monthly standalone post in the time. And you've been through the same system as well, so you would know. Each 6 months, you have to keep looking for another post. And the SHO days before
FI1s and FI2s, yeah.
So yes, I managed, alhamdulillah, to get a standalone post in orthopedics. Well, first neurosurgery, because I had worked in neurosurgery in Pakistan, and everybody, even in the UK circles, knew Professor Juma. So I was lucky to get that standalone post. Then orthopedics, then basic surgical training. So yes, it was going all well till I did my MRCS and then started on the route, which is called the middle grade tier, or the second level between the consultant and an SHO. So just for the information of all the IMGs, there used to be and still are different ways of training in UK, as might be in Australia and Canada or US as well. The training grade and the non-training grade. You may be working the same shift, doing the same amount of procedures, etc. But if you do not have a national training number, you are not a trainee, and the path will not lead you to become a consultant. You can continue working on the non-training grade and you will end up doing the same thing and will be doing rounds for your colleague who will become a consultant in your head one day.
Yeah.
So I was lucky to have had discussions with a senior consultant of mine who was also from Pakistan and who advised me. We will continue doing the same. And this MRCS will basically be Master of Retraction and Cutting of Sutures. So MRCS.
Yes.
So you will continue to hold the retractor for your colleagues who will become consultants, and you will cut sutures for them. So it's better to go into the GP land or the family medicine, or take up this new specialty, this casualty or accident and emergency.
That was it was called, yes.
So I was always a hands-on type person, and you can't ask a surgeon to be sitting on your on the chair all day. With due respect to all the family medicine people, my wife is a family medicine consultant herself, GP. So she doesn't like this rhetorical statement, but I had to choose the active one. So I chose emergency medicine. And that was when the MTAS, which was the medical training admission system, something like that, that was introduced, and all the applications became online. So it would be all over the UK instead of applying separately for each of the posts. And I was lucky to get through the emergency training program. And it was by coincidence. It's totally opposite to what Zafar has said. I had no intention of becoming an emergency physician, because to me, it was like, he can't do surgery, or he can't be a cardiologist, so he's doing emergency medicine. This was the thought process in Pakistan, because those who could not get into a training program, they will go to become casualty medical officers. They see the patient, make a referral. Okay, we've got an appendicitis surgeon, you come and take over. So that's what the concept was in those days. But to be honest, when I took up emergency medicine, I had to go through the structured training program, the BELT process that churns you out. You do ICU, you do anesthetics, you do acute medicine, and then you see there's a lot more beyond surgery. There's a lot more thinking going on beyond just the cutting and holding of the retractor. So I liked it. And your first question, would you still do it again? Now, if I had the opportunity, like in Back to the Future type movie, if I could go back in time, I would choose the path that Zafar took. I would sit MLE exams and I would go to US to pursue emergency medicine. Because we thought in those days that US is only for general medicine. You can't get any of the other specialties. Emergency medicine was not existing. So yes, emergency medicine, now I love it. And if I have to do again, if I have to tell my child to do it, yes, because if I love it, then I can enjoy and sustain doing all these evening shifts, odd hours, unsocial hours. So if you don't love it, don't come into emergency medicine. That's my advice.
No, I concur. I concur. I think I like the point that you've raised. There are 2 points especially. I think when it comes to choosing the specialty as a junior doctor, it's about the influences around you. And somehow surgeons back home in Pakistan were these larger than life characters. They were soft spoken. They had that persona of private practice that it oozes charm. And immediately you want to fill in that persona yourself. So it is like a no-brainer. I want to be like him. You don't want to become a surgeon, but you want to be like him. That's, I think, a fundamental mistake that we often make as junior doctors. We are in love with their personalities, not their profession. And I think that's the mistake I was certainly making. But when I come back, or we had more exposure, so as to say, you can have a very good personality in different specialties and can be an influencer in your own regard. Jabin, tell me, would you do it again?
I will definitely do emergency medicine. I will not do anything else. Like I still remember we were sitting in the Arag auditorium and me and my friend were discussing, like they were calling us one by one, which specialty you want to choose for house job. And then
Yes.
we both were discussing medicine. I cannot do surgery. I hate it. Ops gynae, never. So what is left? Peds is left. Okay, go for it. Go. And then fortunately we used to cover while we were in the pediatric unit. There were 3 units: DS Akram, Professor Iqbal Memon, and then one Dr. Inkisar, who was in Liari. So there were 3 pediatric unit. They used to cover emergency every day. The pediatric emergency was there in addition to the casualty. So I have an exposure, but not as a specialty, as a kind of that every second day we have to sit into the emergency room, admit the patient, bring them upstairs. So I think I always love it, acute care. I know Dr. Shankar Lal was our rota scheduler, and I used to beg him, Dr. Shankar, please don't put me into the protein calorie malnutrition room or into the room 2, because I don't want to calculate the calories all day. And like this is how the interest developed. And as I told that when I come to the Aga Khan emergency department, it get reinforced. That is the first point where I realized that it can be a separate subspecialty or specialty, and this is what I want to do, and I don't want to change it. That's interest stay from there. And I think I resonate with Zafar that this is one of the most competitive specialty in Canada as well. Adult emergency, pediatric emergency medicine. And what I love most about it is the adrenaline rush, 24/7 availability, minutes that we can make differences in somebody's life. And I think now with the time, we have proven that emergency medicine is not providing acute care, but it is in trauma prevention, in any of the preventive measures, in public health, in like advocacy. I think the horizon of the emergency medicine is so much broadened that everybody is looking up to us as a specialty to not only provide that emergent care, but also the follow-ups, advocacy, and the part of the preventive measures that somehow they are not able to implement as we have implemented through our specialty.
I think that's a very good point. I think emergency medicine in 10 years has just sort of mushroomed into some subspecialization: ultrasound, toxicology, medical education, simulation, and also, some other specialties like even aerospace and pressure medicine, like deep space. They're all sort of stemming out and mushrooming. So the future is looking good. Imad, enlighten me and the rest of the audience, please.
Right. So just going back to how I've come to choose emergency medicine initially. So I came to Saudi Arabia after I'd finished my house job, done a 3-month stint with UNICEF in Pakistan, and hoping to become a pediatrician. And then subspecialize in pediatric nephrology because they are the smartest people in the room. So, and I considered myself one of those people that I could be the smartest person in any room I walk into. A little bit of naivety, a little bit of innocence of youth, but that's what I thought. So I came to Saudi Arabia and I started looking for a job and managed to find a job about an hour and a half drive away from my home in Riyadh, in a small town in emergency medicine. So they didn't have any specialists, they didn't have any consultants in their emergency departments. It was a training job, a resident job. And my interview was held by the head of anesthesia, the head of orthopedics, the head of surgery, and the head of medicine, and the hospital executive director. And as I finished my interview and I was coming out, the anesthetist came running out after me. He's like, I can't really tell you, but well done, you've got the job. And I was due to start the next day. Next day, I walked into the emergency department, and there's 5 or 6 doctors there who had been working for quite a long time, and they started training me and telling me what the job was all about. And I remember this Saudi elderly gentleman in his 70s who came in with some diarrhea and vomiting. He came in, was feeling a little bit lethargic. He had some diarrhea and vomiting. He was mildly dehydrated clinically. And these doctors lay him down on a bed, started an IV line, and gave him a liter of saline in about 35 minutes. And he perked up and said, I feel a lot better and I'd like to go home. And I said, you can't go home just yet because your vomiting and diarrhea is going to continue once you go home. So we need to make sure that we've filled you up so that you don't come back in a day or two. So over the next 35 minutes, they gave him another liter of saline and he went into cardiac arrest right there in front of us. And everybody was scratching their head saying, how did this happen? What's going on? Why did this happen? They started CPR, and in that time, the anesthetist wasn't there. And they asked me if I could intubate while they were doing CPR. I said, yeah, that's not a problem. I know how to intubate. So I intubated the patient, CPR started. Unfortunately, he didn't survive. And that was the day I decided that this is the specialty I'm going to continue in for the rest of my life. I'm going to train people in it. I'm going to prevent something like this happening to somebody else just because of untrained staff in emergency care. And that was one of the biggest driving forces behind my choosing emergency medicine as a specialty. And I think when you've got those deep personal connections and you've got those deep motivations, then there is no question. I would do this over and over again. I would probably not waste any time doing anything else. In fact, I never did. I've been doing emergency medicine since I've graduated as a doctor.
That's good. That's amazing. That's an amazing and very, spine shivering story. And I think that's the other aspect. And I think Zafar, Yasir, Jabin would all agree, and all of our audience who are listening, that it's perhaps one of the only specialty which has got a unique emotional aspect to it without getting too emotional and being charged with an emotional side. Like when you're dealing with a cardiac arrest or when you're dealing with a fatality, and you have to go and break that bad news. You have to go and connect as a person. You're no longer a doctor now. You're actually now, you meant to be their relative now. So you put on an entirely different hat and you talk to a parent, you talk to a son, you talk to a daughter. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I did whatever I can, but I could not save your father, your 3-year-old boy. And I think that aspect of communication really, it just shines up on my personality, that the conversations that I'm able to have is just amazing. And I don't think that I can have similar kind of conversation if I'm an anesthetist or a surgeon or something. Maybe I can, but I think the connection in that hyped up environment, be able to switch off and then switch on. Now, Zafar Bhai, obviously, an interesting journey. Got a few things to influence. But tell us and us, our audience as well, what were the challenges? Because you said that you were initially in Pakistan, then in the UK, then you did USMLE. What were the challenges that you faced during your licensing and initial exams? And what tips would you give someone today, IMGs especially, to streamline and to be more economical with their time? How can they, you know, when should they plan about the licensing exam if they are really thinking about postgraduate training outside Pakistan? When should they really start training or thinking about USMLE or PLAB or AMC? And how to be more smart about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to answer that question, let me tell you a little bit about how my journey started. So initially, my intention was always to go to the States, or and I was always kind of geared up to that. I'd done electives in the States. I'd gotten letters of recommendation so that when my time came, I would be ready, and my application would happen. And then, of course, I graduated in 2001.
9/11.
September 11th happened, and suddenly the whole framework for Pakistani Muslim doctors changed completely. And so it was a big challenge. I'd stayed in Pakistan to do my house job, so I didn't apply until 2002, 2003 cycle. But I'd done my steps there, but it was during that time period. But that time period when you sit your final PLAB, then there's several months where you're not doing anything while you're waiting for the results to come, etc. So I started studying for my USMLE at that time. And because of 9/11, it was a big mess because they closed all the centers in Pakistan. And you had the one center that was open was in Singapore. Utke Singapore jaye. So by luck, they opened a center in Islamabad. So I had to go on the day one of my orientation for a house job. I had to go to Islamabad to sit my step one or step two, whichever one it was. And you couldn't say no because you'd paid X amount of money to go to register for this exam. So you had to go and sit it. And you needed a future. So it was all that. So, but the point was I took care of that in and around my house job. So those exams I took care of, intending to go to US. So after my house job, I went to US because of my previous electives there. I had some good letters. The application went through, I had some interviews and all this. And time came for the match, and I matched in a program. And then the embassy wouldn't give me a visa. So I was delayed in the visa. By stroke of luck, my father had done his post-graduation in England. And so we'd had British citizenship at that time. So I was able to go to England. But my plan had to turn 180 degrees. I planned all this time to go to America. And then suddenly I couldn't go, even though I had a job. I couldn't go because my visa was delayed, and they gave the excuse, we'll let you know, we'll call you, don't call us, type of situation. That kept going, no word. Eventually I lost the residency in the US at that time, and I ended up staying in England. Now what do I do? So then I had to I said, okay, well, I have to do something. So I sat the whole PLAB at that time. But that took me then another 6 to 8 months to go through the whole PLAB process. First, I'd never, the PLAB exam is very different from the USMLE. So I hadn't even thought about how to study for it. So I had to go in that. And then you might remember, Yasser, there were these courses in East London that they were doing for this. So you had to go to that and all this. All this I had to learn on the fly. I didn't know anything about it. By chance, people told me, do this, do that, and I went and did it. And so I went, did that, but that wasted another overall 9 to 12 months just to get through the exam process. So the point is that, this is quite a long process, regardless whether you go to States or whether you go to England or Australia. if you've decided, and some people have said they decided in medical school that they were going to go abroad, look at what you need to do then, see what the requirements are. And the requirements now are different than what it was when I did it, but it's very important to stay up to date with what are the latest rules and what is it. And I would say in your third, fourth year of medical school is when you should start thinking about what I need to do to get to my whatever dream it is that you want to get to, and start tailoring your studies towards that so that you can start taking that as soon as you're able to. So for example, you can start taking the most of these exams after you've graduated from medical school. So you should put yourself in a position, for those of you who are still in medical school or listening to this, that as soon as you finish your exams, you're past your exams, and I don't know what the process is now with PMDC, but whatever registration that you're now a doctor, then you can become eligible to start getting your credentials verified and be eligible for these exams. So, and as soon as that's done, get that process started, because that takes a little bit of time, and you don't want to be wasting time unnecessarily, especially if there's a financial element to it, that you need to get a job to support your family, etc., things like that. Don't waste time. If you're thinking that I want to go abroad, then start that process as soon as possible. The other benefit I had was, having done the MLEs, when eventually I went to the States, it was once you're done, you're done. So, I had my ECFMG certificate. It's indefinitely validated. So once you pass it, so I didn't have to bother doing any of the exams again, because if I'd done it, 8, 9 years ago, rather than almost 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to sit those exams again.
Fair enough.
So do them as early as possible. And, once you have an idea of what you want to do, just think about that, in the next 1 or 2 years, what do I need to do to have finished that exam, and start thinking about it that way.
I think that's really important, that you have to really plan in your fourth year, medical college, medical school, and really work in the final year, because it is a lengthy process. And I think one issue which I'd think about, that most of these licensing exams are similar when the clinical aspect, as far as the clinical aspect is concerned. It's more about office medicine, GP type, emergency type, common. So the theme remains the same. The way the questions are asked might be different, but I think the USMLE and PLAB 2, they might be very similar. The other thing is that obviously USMLE part 1 is a bit more detailed in terms of basic sciences, but that needs to be planned when you're in year 4. Moving on to Yasir Bhai, tell us something about your PLAB encounters. Was it challenging for you? When did you plan it, and how did it go for you?
Well, to be honest, I didn't think of the PLAB earlier. My initial intention was to get the surgery fellowship from Pakistan. That's why I took the FCPS route, and then the financial matters prompted me to take it a bit earlier, like go to the UK earlier. Otherwise, I planned to do the FCPS first and then go to UK. So one of the challenges to get out of the country at the time was my own father, who's a retired professor from the Karachi University, also taught at the Dow University of Health Sciences later. He was so much of the old school thought. You've got your Federal Public Service Commission passed, you've got a pensionable job, how dare you leave the country? You have to think about your future and all that stuff. So, and you're working with Professor Rashid Juma, neurosurgery. You're going to be a neurosurgeon. So one of the challenges was to try to get around my family, my parents, who had very high expectations from me. My father himself left UK, came back in the 60s, having done his PhD from Birmingham. So he was not too happy of going back to UK for his own child. He left the country to come back to his own country to serve there. So how dare his son, who has been brought up in Pakistan, has got the training from Sindh Medical College, JPMC, and he's now planning to go ahead. So one of the challenges was to say no to my father, resign from that Public Service Commission post, and then jump into that frying pan or whatever you call it. Because once I landed there, then I realized the actual challenges of what I was telling earlier. The grass is not green, the grass is greener on the other side, or that's what it looks like to us. So as Zafar was saying, when I landed there, you had to get onto these courses in the East Ham. One of the challenges was to pass the PLAB exam within that visa time frame that you have. Because you've got the PLAB exam to pass, you've got to get into an attachment. To get into an attachment, to get a referee, and you needed 2 or 3 referees to get a locum position, and that locum position would then open up your GMC registration, and that would be the route to extend your visa further. So everything was linked, like A to B, B to C, like that. And we had like I had a 6-month visa, but only 3 months remained because I had to stay back. My first one was born in Pakistan, so I had to delay my departure from Pakistan. So anyhow, I landed in UK 30th of November 2003, and I had my PLAB exam 10th of December. That was only 10 days to rush on these workshops, and finally I got through. And at that time, I mean, it was Guy's and St. Thomas where the exams used to happen. Now the GMC does it in its own centers, and it was told it's only a 50% pass rate from Guy's and St. Thomas. And then I had my MRCS1 exam booked as well on, I think, 8th of January. I can't remember, I can't forget the dates. So soon after the PLAB, I had to take my MRCS exam. So 2 exams within, let's say, 5 weeks time, and then to search for an attachment, to get a locum, to get the GMC before my visa expired, because I had burnt the boats back in home. So I could not show my face back to my dad, and my pounds stock that my father had given me generously, that was also running out. And I was thinking, Yasir, now you have to start thinking of frying burgers somewhere in East Ham. Third challenge was, well, not to me exactly, but to my colleagues and many of the IMGs who would go there, is the residence. When you land in a foreign country, you have to have some form of a place to have a shelter. I was lucky in the sense my father's closest friend was in London at the time. So I was lucky to be living in Marylebone at the time. So I was in his flat, and I would go to East Ham and meet my colleagues there who were renting or sharing those rooms, rat-infested rooms, where they had to study, combined study with the rats running here and there. So I think that's a challenge as well, which the IMGs should think of when you're going to another country. It's not, everything is not so good. Things may look, oh, I'm going to Goliath, as you said.
Yes.
And yes, when I landed there, it was November 30th. It was gloomy. I remember coming out of the airport at 2:30 in the afternoon, and it was dark. I said, is this what UK is about? And it was drizzling. I said, it's gloomy. I want to go back to Pakistan. So yes, the things, the initial shock of what I perceived UK as, the exams, that was a lot to take. And if I did not have my uncle to stay at home with, to have his shoulder to cry on, I might have been pushed into making a decision to come back home. So whoever is planning to go and leaving your own country, leaving your own home or so, please think about certain other negative aspects as well. There are many cons to changing your country, changing your culture, changing your environment and your friends. There's a lot to take. Unless you have good family and friends support over there, then it can be helpful, which I was lucky to have.
Yes. No, I absolutely agree. And I think just reflecting some of that thought process, I was actually married when I went to the UK. So I was one of those rare breed of doctors who were married very early, straight away after the house job, because my wife, who was in the same year as I was, said that, look, मैं इतना इंतजार नहीं कर सकती, शादी दोनों करके चलते हैं, and then we will do exams together. So she and I sat PLAB 1, PLAB 2 together, studied together. So I think that's my take on it, that if you're planning these sort of exam, there was almost fail-safe advice that first make yourself safe by doing a local postgraduate exam, which is FCPS 1. Then do PLAB 1. And because there are issues about surrounding the visas. So USMLE, which was my preferred route as well, that there are issues. It's a long program in terms of step 1, 2, and I think probably 3 as well. I don't know much about that system. So then do PLAB 1 and PLAB 2. So me and my wife did PLAB 1 together. We actually did PLAB 2 together in the same center. And we were living with our uncle in Whitechapel at that time. So we had a head above our house and he was single. So that was a blessing in disguise. But grass was certainly not greener. I could not find a job for nearly about 8 months after 3 clinical observerships. It was, and I was running out of money. Now I had a young family. We were expecting actually our first child in a few months' time. Our visa was running out. And I literally was like, now what do? I have to go back to Pakistan. I've not even done FCPS 1. I've not even done MLE. What do I do? And then it really sort of, I was under the same impression that you have to go. And I asked for a loan from my father at that time, that can you please give me some loan? I'll do some courses. I did MRCS 1. I did some courses. My wife did MRCP 1. We did a clinical observership. And then it just, that's the idea. You have to keep on doing something whilst you're actually looking for a job to improve yourself. It's not like a wait thing. It's not like a queue that your number will come and you'll go. It's about being in the queue and constantly improving yourself, which is the hard part, especially, if you've got financial constraints and family issues and what have you. Imad, what would you share in an aspect?
Are you going to ask Dr. Jabin this question at the end?
I've got a special question for Dr. Jabin, so I'll come to her later.
Okay,
you speak for your story.
Right. So my story: challenges and hardships faced.
Reference to the licensing exams.
Reference to the licensing exam. Saudi licensing exam, the Saudi Commission for Health Specialties. I came to Saudi Arabia after I'd finished my house job, and I went to the Saudi Commission. I just let you know, there are no doctors in my family from my side. I mean, so I am the only doctor. I was left on my own to figure out what my path was going to be through life. But when I wanted to be a physicist, my parents said, there's absolutely no chance in hell that we're going to let you be a physicist. You've got 2 options, doctor, engineer. You can choose, or we can choose for you. I said, well, then why don't you choose for me if you're not going to let me choose? So that's how I became a doctor. But I came to Saudi after my house job and walked into the Saudi Commission for Health Specialties office very naively and said, I'm a doctor. I have an MBBS degree and I want to work in Saudi Arabia. What do I need? I said, how much experience do you have? I said, 1 year house job. I said, you're not allowed to work in Saudi Arabia. You must have 3 years experience to get a license to practice in Saudi Arabia. I said, but where am I going to get 3 years of practice from? I've spent my whole life in Saudi Arabia. I went to Pakistan to study medicine and I'm back now. I said, oh, did you study here? Yes, I did. Do you have a certificate of secondary education from Saudi schools? I said, yes, I do. So can you show it to us? So I went back home, came back and showed them my A-level certificate. I said, yeah, that's fine. Because if you've schooled in Saudi Arabia, then you don't need those 3 years. So they allowed me to register for the exam. And I misunderstood what they said initially. They said you can sit the exam twice. And my understanding was, okay, I can pay once and I can sit the exam twice. It wasn't. You could pay once and then sit the exam once and then pay again and sit the exam again. Luckily, I passed the first go. So, and they gave me a license to practice. But then nobody would give me a job because they want you to have experience in Saudi Arabia, but nobody will give you experience in Saudi Arabia. So eventually, like I said, I got a job an hour and a half away from the main city of Riyadh in a small town. It was a 20-bedded hospital.
What about the PLAB? What about the PLAB thing?
So PLAB thing was actually quite straightforward for me. I came to the UK to attend a RChem conference. And in that, I stood up and I said, I'm an emergency medicine specialist from Saudi Arabia. I have a question and we do things this way in Saudi. Why are you saying that you do things like this? And after that, in the coffee break, I was surrounded by about 30 different consultants offering me a job. So I started applying for jobs and said, okay, maybe this is the right time to move out. I interviewed in about 15 different places. I got 13 job offers. And then I said, well, how do I start working? I don't have GMC registration. Are you going to sponsor me? Should I do MRChem, MRCP? And one of my interviewers said, I think you should do PLAB. The next PLAB one is in 3 weeks and you can still register for it. And based on our interview, I think you would succeed. So after this interview, I registered for the PLAB 1 exam. I did PLAB 1 and I went back to Saudi. Unfortunately, this was the June exam. So there was no PLAB 2 in June, July, August. So I got the first PLAB 2 exam 29th of September. So I came from Saudi and I joined Mr. Swami's Academy. Mm-hmm. You would have heard of that. So I attended his academy and I sat PLAB 2 and I was successful. I already had the job in hand. And then I went back, got my certificate of sponsorship and came back and started working. So no major hassles anywhere. Been very lucky. Alhamdulillah.
Okay. Jabin, I'm just going to ask you this question because you've got a unique perspective to share, but my question is very specific now. There was almost a question about FCPS that you need to secure FCPS as a safety valve before you embark on, a postgraduate career. How much of that is relevant, and when should you plan for FCPS 1 when you're a postgraduate trainee in Pakistan? Like, as Yasir Bhai said, that he had to literally burn those boats and come over to the UK. My question is perhaps to both Yasir and Jabin, that when should one plan for FCPS 1? I think the things might have changed in terms of regulation, but what is the right time to think about it?
Basically, as Ahmad said, and it reminded me, I'm also the only physician in my whole family. So literally, I don't know anything about all the other options. What I know at the time when I did my MBBS, that FCPS is the thing which make you specialized. So I go to that route. But when I moved outside, if someone is literally aiming to pursue their career outside Pakistan, other than like in GMC, I know because when I did my FCPS part 2, some of my colleagues said that you are eligible to have a GMC registration because you have done FCPS part 2 pediatrics in Pakistan. But for part 1, other than having a opportunity or probability that you can come back in Pakistan and still can pursue the training. But now, as far as I know, because I was a FCPS emergency medicine examiner in Pakistan as well, that they have limit the timeline as well. Now it's not indefinite, that part 1 validity is also, I think, for 1 or 2 years, and then it expires, and then you have to give one again, if I remember correctly. Rules might have changed. I'm talking about the knowledge which I have 5 years before. So if someone's career goals are to pursue any external exams and to practice outside Pakistan, then FCPS 1 is not helpful at all in at least what I explored is UK and Canadian market. I'm not sure about the Saudi Arabia, Middle East, and the Australian exams, but yes, the studies will help because as we have talked about the USMLE basic, like I used to practice my FCPS exam from the step 1 USMLE book. So education wise or studying wise, it might be helpful, but from any other help, I'm not sure. At least to me, it doesn't help any at all.
Okay, no, that's really important to know. I think the timing of these things should be more decided.
If you don't mind, I'd just like to add a couple of things here. With respect to the FCPS, your question was very pertinent, whether we should aim for having a backup plan if we are planning to go abroad, or yes, we should go abroad as soon as.
Because look at the situation of 9/11, look at the situation of COVID. And that's really a relevant point. Every few years, you might be faced with a single dilemma again, that you're coming from Pakistan, you're national of Pakistan, you're coming from India or whatever country you're coming from, but then again, you've burnt all your boats and then you have to start all over again. And a year is a long time in medical industry.
I'm saying that because I've just been reading the messages. There's a colleague here or a candidate here. I mean, somebody who's attending. She's just asked a couple of questions here, only to me rather than to everyone. So I'll just read it out for the benefit of all. When you first arrived to the UK, did you have to do FY1 and FY2, or were your internship and public service sufficient? Also, carrying on after I had given the answers, if I got my internship and public service from my home country, and she's from outside UK or any of the Western countries, would it be sufficient? Because if I don't do either and apply to the UK, there's no going back. So that resonates what you have said, that because of the COVID or any other situations, there should be a backup plan, and not everybody is as lucky as me or Zaf or Imad or even Jabin to have carried on there. And I'm sure that you would all have had sometimes in our careers where we were thinking of burning those boats there and then going back to Pakistan or our own home countries. So if you already have plans to go abroad, I would say still continue with your internship. And during that time, if there is a national basic program, go for it. Okay, like in my case, I did my FCPS 1 and I didn't sit back at home. I was teaching at Bakai at the time. So rather than going to the libraries and preparing for the exams or so, I took up a demonstrator job in anatomy in Bakai Medical. So in 2001 or so, I was there teaching while carrying on my CV. So there's no break on the CV. One of the questions which is asked in the interviews over there, which used to be asked, was, why is there a career gap on your CV? So you should make sure that you are carrying on some form of profession while preparing for your exams. Now that can be as early as in the 4th year or final year. As a medical student, then no problem. But when you have done your house job, then at least carry on with some form of a job and then take the exams there and then. But if you have got those initial basic exams, then do not delay much. Don't be in two boats to carry on with either FCPS or go to MLE. Then take it as soon as rather than later. Okay. With respect to the question to that candidate, FY1 and FY2 was not present in those times. It is a recent thing, recent as in the last 10 years or so. But in those times, it used to be the SHO lot or the senior house officers. And our experience, as she has asked, was counted or was taken into consideration when we were applying for a job. Now there are certain other criteria. So if you have to get into an FY1 or FY2, which is a foundation training program, I would recommend it because it allows you to get into the mainstream system. And that I'm just sharing a personal experience. That's what I told my wife as well. She was an OB&G resident in Pakistan. And when she came there, having gone through my experience, I told her, don't get into this SHO stream, because I struggled and I suffered a lot going through those SHO jobs till I got my BST, basic surgical training also. I told her, get into the FY1. So it may seem as if you are a senior person. I mean, she's my class fellow. And yet she had to go back and do the FY1 and FY2, which is like repeating your house job again. And that's after 5 years, because she had a career break. We had children and we thought to complete our family before moving ahead. So she came back like 6-7 years behind me. So she took up the FY1, FY2, but believe me, as soon as she has got the FY2, she got selected straight away into the mainstream training programs. She got the psychiatry rotation as well as the general practice rotation. We didn't choose the OB&G because of certain other family reasons. I wouldn't diverge that, but getting into the FY1 and FY2 helps you avoid all that trouble that all of us, I believe, the HO lot have gone through. So
like a old system versus new thing.
FY1 and FY2.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Yes, yes. There's a question on Facebook for Dr. Zafar. My question is for Dr. Zafar. It's from Faisal Mahmood Chima. Are there any opportunities or programs for ER physician to do 1 to 2 years of supervised emergency medicine training in the US?
It's a good question. A lot of people, write to me saying that, they want to come over for a year and see what's going on. There's some challenges for that. One is that, the medical legal environment here requires that you be either fully trained or you're in a training program. So they haven't really had any feasible way of providing kind of hands-on where you're actually working independently and being able to do that unless you've gone through the training program here. And since the, over the last 10 years, post, then post 9/11 world, the opportunities to get visas to come over to the States has been challenging as well, which has limited some opportunities here. The flip side is some people have come over and done fellowships in different things. So they've, there's different opportunities for, like there's a disaster medicine fellowship in Boston, for example, that people have come and done. There's programs through Johns Hopkins in Baltimore that people have done where they've also then on the side been able to do some work in the emergency department as well through that program. So there are few opportunities, and a lot of them aren't openly advertised. It's more kind of trying to talk to people and seeing what people have done before and what kind of word of mouth opportunities for them. So there are some, but overall it's a little bit challenging, much more so than it is in UK, to be able to come to the US just because of a lot of the medical legal aspects of it.
Yeah. There's also a question for Dr. Jabeen. I heard getting residency in Canada is very hard for IMG, especially for fresh graduates. Do you think it's really worth trying to get into Canada right after completing MBBS? Or do you have suggestion on completing the residency training in the UK or USA and then applying for fellowship in Canada?
Thank you, Azad, for raising this important aspect of the training program in Canada. I do agree with him. It is very, very difficult to get residency in Canada, especially those who come for other reasons and there are gaps and they have started thinking about exams. But I do believe if you have planned or prepared before, like right from your MBBS, and then start giving your exams and then plan in terms of your rotate, like your some of the observerships you have done here or research project that you have done with somebody here, and then planned it thoughtfully. Then I have two of my recent trainees in the last this year and the last year who had done the similar kind of things, and they are accepted into the match because like they have to compete with everybody in the Canadian, like a similar kind of a match, and they should be as good as the other. I do agree that some people have done like me. I have done similar kind of a thing that I completed my training in completed my training in Pakistan and then did my master's, but I got into the fellowship program in Canada. So that is kind of an avenue if you are thinking of later into your career. For example, you have done your MBBS and you are in your career pathway somewhere else. Then we have many of the institutes, especially I can talk about the Toronto and also in McMaster, McGill, Vancouver, which they are offering fellowships to the IMG, but then for those fellowship, you should have a postgraduate exam. That could be Pakistani postgraduate exam, that could be UK and US. For the UK and US, getting the license is kind of an easy procedure, but having independent license I'm talking about. But for the Pakistani IMGs, it is a little bit different stream and a little bit difficult pathway, but still you will be able to get into. But then after MBBS, you will get into residency program, and then you will be right from the beginning in the stream. But if you have done any residency or any further postgraduate training from anywhere else, and you will get into fellowship, and then you will, after different time limits. For example, if you have done in UK and USA, the time period is 18 months. But if you have been from Pakistan, then the time period is a little bit longer, I guess 3 years or something like that, to get after your fellowship that experience, and then you can apply for your CPSO license to work into Canada. Another challenge for if you are applying for fellowship, because those fellowships are not academic fellowships. So it will be 1 year fellowship, like it happens. I got into PEM fellowship, which is a 1 year fellowship. Then after 1 year, you have to keep on searching what you will do after this 1 year. And then you have to reapply for your work permit according to whatever you get. So I did my PEM fellowship and I did my simulation fellowship for almost 3 years combined. And then I got into the CPSO license and then into the like a kind of a staff position here. I hope it has answered some of the aspects.
Yep. I think that's really very specific to the Canada. There has been many challenges for people who are in Canada. They don't actually get the opportunity. Let's move the pace up a little bit in the interest of the time. I'm just going to move on, and I think it's a general question to everyone now instead of going and rotating through. And anybody can take up the question if they feel connected. Was the training hard? And are there anything or any specific issues to consider, specifically being from Pakistan, to consider when you're training in Western system at a personal level and professional level? Tell us something about it. Anybody can start on that question. Zafar, would you like to say something?
Sure. Yeah. It's I think it's coming from Pakistan, and I think Yasser referred to this earlier. It's a culture change. There's a big culture difference in the way people live their lives, for one thing, and then also in how the approach is to the patient. I would say that the clinical training you get in Pakistan, I think, is world class. I think the amount of exposure and the amount of knowledge and stuff that we gain in Pakistan is really phenomenal. We see things that are in just people have read in textbooks in the Western world. But what is lacking, I think, in Pakistan is a little bit of the art of medicine and how to be more finessed in your approach to taking a history examination, especially in emergency medicine, and developing quickly a rapport with your patient. That you have to gain their trust quickly to be able to get to the bottom of their question or problem and be able to understand it. And then also, if you've lived all your life in Pakistan or Middle East or somewhere, and then coming to UK and understanding depending on, especially in Yorkshire, I think, where Yasser said he was, trying to understand the accent for one thing, can be a challenge. Trying to understand the lingo and what people mean when they're saying something, and things that might, on a personal level, may be offensive to you or doesn't quite mix with your worldview, but it's quite normal over there. You have to be able to adjust to that so that you approach your patient care in a non-judgmental way, because this patient is coming to you in a very vulnerable part of their day or situation, and you have to be able to address that. Otherwise, even if it conflicts with your own kind of personal values and things, you have to be able to adjust to that quickly. We when we spend 5, 6, 7 years through medical school, a house job in Pakistan, and you're used to doing things the one way, very much the hierarchy that that the consultant will yell at everybody, and everybody else is quiet and nobody can speak up or challenge or anything like that. Then you lose out on your education. You lose out on the ability to kind of get the respect from your patients as well. So I think understanding, not only you have to be good at the medicine, but you also have to be good at adjusting to the culture that's wherever you end up living.
Yeah,
that's a very important point. And I think one thing which definitely helps is communication. If you're a good communicator, if you can develop, as you said, rapport, not only with the patients, but with the staff. I think the nursing staff in particular, there's always a mindset that, the nursing staff will take you, will just say, aale haathon lena. He's come from a third world country. What does he know about our system? We'll teach him, train him, whatever. But I think being a good communicator is still at the level of being a consultant. If you really need to develop your place, or if you really need to find your spot or place, you need to be able to communicate across the board in a much more efficient way, and that will you know eliminate much of the thorns and thorny training aspects. So communication and training is very important. The other advice I would give to any IMGs: plan your postgraduate exams as soon as you can. Don't spend and waste time, trial and error, because postgraduate exams notoriously and evidently are difficult for IMGs. You may have to do them once, twice, and sometimes, there've been IMGs who've not been able to pass their postgraduate exams. So plan them early on. Select the specialty that you want to do and start thinking of the exams. Don't waste time, because real life starts after passing the fellowship. You were saying something, Dr. Jabin?
Yeah, I was just want to echo with Zafar that the cultural change and the approach and the language is the kind of a barrier. And I feel like clinically, I guess whatever I have learned from Pakistani training, like I don't think so that have make me or put any hindrance in any way in my clinical work. At most of the things I have seen them a lot, which they have not seen. Like I was surprised when the first case of malaria was come in, and they were malaria, and I was looking at them. What happened to them? We used to see every day so many malaria. Why they are so excited? So things like that. We have seen so many in clinical experience, which is so rich. But soft skills like teamwork, like you have said, communication, like being a team player, being accepting that we don't know or we want to know about things. So I think that our training lack, and those are the things that we need to develop. And then to express, like when I went for my fellowship, I used to hesitate. Should I say this? Is it appropriate to say, or am I be wrong if I say this in this way? So I feel like what you know, being confident in your clinical skills and but I need to show that what you know is also important when you were working in any external environment.
That's true.
Yes,
that's you're thinking.
Valid, fantastic point that you've made with respect to the exposure that we get in the third world countries as opposed to what is expected in the far Western world. But there is also a difference, which I noted myself, that we tend to be exposed to a lot, but we often do not know what will happen if something goes wrong. We are not taught in those senses, which I learned when I got to UK. To be honest, I understood the principles of the ALS, ATLS, APLS when I got there. And to know when things go wrong, what are you going to do? Rather than be a trainee like a mechanic that, okay, you've got to do this when you see this. What if it doesn't fit? So that is one aspect. The other thing is regarding getting into the culture. There can be various aspects of that. I mean, it could be the language barrier. I mean, it took me like maybe a few months to understand what they actually meant when they said, I'm not being funny. It's not like they're trying to be funny or not funny. It's like they are very serious about it, or I'm not happy about it. It's a subtle way of saying I'm very angry about it. So the Brits have a way of being very polite when expressing their things, or you should do this, or they would say, I would do this kind of different way. Okay, fine, you are going to do it different, but I've done it this way. No, the consultant is telling you to redo your presentation. You have to do it the way he's doing. He's just suggesting you in a way. So these are certain things that we learn. We are not taught about in the in the IELTS exam, which you learn. And when your colleagues tell you this is not what he meant, now you are in trouble. Or he's asking you, okay, would you be able to do this next evening shifts tomorrow? If he's not asking you, he's actually telling you to do it. So be aware of these language barriers as well. This was not just in UK, it's in Saudi, and Ahmad would agree with me. They speak in phrases. It's a tone that you have to understand, their body language. If they want you to do something, they will ask you, Yalla, you should be doing it. Yes, my boss. Yes, I will be doing it. So that's one thing. Be aware of the culture. As it is said, do in Rome as the Romans do. So try to be a bit flexible. Third thing regarding the training, despite all your past vast exposure in your own country or so, do not try to impinge it on the country that you've gone to learn. I mean, that I felt that, and I was a bit hard by it because I was doing laparotomies by year 2 as an R2 equivalent resident back in Pakistan. I was even doing the craniotomies when I was with Professor Juma. So when I went there and they asked me, okay, are you okay to close this wound or do a suturing? He's telling me to do it in the theater. And I said, no, that's fine. And the registrar told me, the consultant has been impressed with you. He's allowing you to close his wound. And I said, I used to do laparotomy myself. Why am I supposed to downgrade myself? No. I was told, if you knew about it, then why did you come to my country? You're here to learn. So learn the way I'm telling you to learn. So you have to overcome your ego. If you are there to learn from another country, another culture, try to be part of it.
Yeah.
The language, the norms. I mean, few of my very good friends were from India. Some non-Muslim Indian friends, the one that I trained with for my MRCS, he used to, in fact, tell me, I mean, I don't know how many of the candidates can understand Urdu or Hindi, but because there were comments that only in English, कि यार तू ऐसे पीछे रह जाएगा क्योंकि ना तो तू पीता है ना तो तू साथ में डांस करने आता है. Like when they would have social parties or so, I would try to avoid it because in my culture, as a Muslim, I could not sit on the table where alcohol was being served or when there was dancing going on after the party, etc. As many of the IMGs who are already in the West, they would have learned by now. But then I was told that there's no harm in actually having a glass of Coke or a Pepsi, sitting at the same table and just clapping from the back, but at least be part of the group. Unless you develop a camaraderie with the people that you are working in as a team, they will continue to abandon you and relieve you or not let you have the opportunities to progress ahead. So that's just a message for the newcomers to the other countries. Try to be flexible, resilient, try to absorb rather than throw your own weight on the culture that you've gone to learn.
I totally resonate with you, Yasser. Like I remember, definitely, I have been a staff in Pakistan from 2018 till 2008 till 2016. And then when I joined the fellowship, literally they used to check my ear examination when I used to tell them it is otitis. And they say, okay, we will go and we will check. And then at times, there was times when I go crying home, like listening to that, like, but you need to be resilient. And then I can tell you by the grace of God, after 6 months, nobody even asked me anything. Okay, Javeen, what you have done, this. They used to sign my chart on the base of whatever assessment I have done without seeing anything. So the change will happen, but you need to be persistent and resilient in the beginning because for them, you are a very new person and they don't know what kind of training you have program you have gone through and how much you can trust, they can trust on us. So that is my message to the IMGs as well.
I'm sorry, Rizwan, I'm butting in again, and just for some senior IMGs as well, because in the UK, they have opened up these tier 2 visas, where many of our colleagues who have done their masters in surgery from India, like MS, etc., and even FCPS from Pakistan or from the African countries, when they are coming there on these tier 2 visas as the middle grade specialist. Okay, they may have been consultants in their own country, but they are not expected to be consultants in the UK where they are coming to train. So they are given the posts of like an assistant consultant or an associate consultant with the category of middle grade specialty registrar, something like that. Okay. So at that time, they may have to go over the board, do the same registrar type level job again.
Yeah.
So please be brave and please be ready to be accepting that for at least the first few months, if not a year or so. But once you've done it, and I can talk about emergency medicine if you've had some experience. A couple of my friends have gone from Middle East to UK, having done 6 months or so as a locum middle grade or so. They were appointed as emergency consultants, especially because of the supply and demand issue, but also because they knew what they had learned and they were practicing it in a polite and a humble way without over showing that I knew more than you guys. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's just to add to that. So, you know, when I went to the States, I'd done all my training in UK and was a consultant there. And I went to the States. I did a year of fellowship, and then, it was always my intention to then try and stay in the States. And the only way to stay in the States was to redo my training from scratch, which was another 3-year residency. And it was, the first year was very difficult for me. It's, even, several family members were saying, यार ये क्या कर रहे हो, वहाँ पर तो तुम consultant थे, यहाँ पर तुम फिर house job कर रहे हो. So matlab, it was, a lot of pressure from that, and a lot of people saying, what are you doing? And personally for me, it was like, in England, I was doing this independently, and now I'm being supervised on, basic stuff. And so for the first 6-7 months, I was like, what do I do? How do I do it? And so I spoke to one of my mentors from fellowship, and he goes, what should I do? How can I just get through this quickly, or what shortcut can I take? And he goes, there's no shortcut. Just put your head down and just do it. Finish your time. After you're done with your time, you'll be graduated, you'll be consultant, and nobody will remember what that you had to go through this. They'll know that you are now consultant there as well. So that's one thing. You can take, it's a period of time, and you go through it. If that's your intention to go abroad, then kind of just fit in with the culture, get through it, and then you'll be in a good position. And then the other thing is that I think everybody who goes abroad is in a unique position because they are ambassadors for Pakistan. And based on, a lot of, you go to some places where the people around you may have never seen anybody from Pakistan before, or they haven't had much experience with an IMG before, especially in emergency medicine, say in the US, where it's relatively, and, if you perform well and, fit in, and, you're seen as competent, you're seen as a nice person, you're seen as this, then you have just paved the path for somebody who's now in the audience today, who's tomorrow trying to get that job. Because a lot of, based on what my seniors had said, because, they were asked, what do you think of this person? He's applying. Because, yeah, he's from my medical college. I've talked to him, and I can vouch for him to some degree. And so, that trust that the seniors have developed will help the juniors of the future. And so it's a responsibility on you as going to wherever you end up going to be the ambassador and represent, and so that other people will have an opportunity, just like we got the opportunities with some help from our seniors. Then we also, once we're in this position, we should be the ambassadors and help keep our reputation high for other future people to come in as well, I think.
Zafar, I'll just get you on there. There's a question from Al Riz. What are the odds of an IMG getting into ER residency in the US?
It's tough because it's it's a specialty that's really popular amongst the U.S. graduates, and just like any country will want to take their own graduates first before they take anybody else. But it's not impossible, and it really depends on how much work you put into it. If you're able to do some time, come over for elective or observership or whatever, get reputation, maybe join one of the faculty, do some research projects so that people know you, then your chances have increased exponentially from anybody else. And so, it's really similar to other jobs. It's a lot of it is, do they know this person compared to the 100 other applicants that are just looking the same on paper? So what makes you different? So if you're really interested in doing something, it's certainly possible. In fact, currently at Yale University, there's a third-year resident. He's from Pakistan. There've been several graduates from Pakistan who are now EM physicians here in the States. So it's certainly possible, but it does take work. As we, there's 10 times more internal medicine spots in the US than there are emergency medicine spots, and so the competition is higher. So if you put the work in, come over, do observership or elective if you can, get involved with some research project, get in touch, talk to people, then your chances of being more successful in the match are that much higher.
Imad, there's a question for you. I've done FRCEM primary and now preparing for FRCEM intermediate SAQ in March 2021. Are there any routes for working in the UK before getting GMC registration? Part one. Currently, I'm working as a junior doctor in a tertiary care hospital in Peshawar in ED, where we have 3 MR Chem and 1 FR Chem consultant. Like one program in Queen Elizabeth is running for international graduate. The other part from the same person, his name is Ali Raza. What should I be looking to gain before starting training in August? Having done non-training 8 months in critical care and now starting in emergency medicine. So I think he's probably trying to ask a question that he's done a primary exam, FR Chem, and has got a due intermediate SEQ. Are there any routes through this credentials working without a GMC registration? And what should he be really doing to improve his experience otherwise?
No, thank you, Rizwan. I was also looking at those questions, and I think it's 2 different people who've posted those questions. So I'll start with Ali Raza, and I'll answer your questions. So
Okay,
the first question you've asked is whether you should go for ACCS or run-through training in the UK for emergency medicine. And the honest answer for that is that you will have to do ACCS regardless of whether you decide to run through or you decide to reapply for HST with another national interview. So you will have to apply for ACCS training. And when you get selected, they will ask you whether you would like to have a run-through program in the same deanery, or if you'd like to complete ACCS and ST3 and then apply for your HST training again nationally and be interviewed. My advice is that it doesn't really matter which one you choose, because there are currently more training posts than there are people who are applying for it. So you don't need to be afraid to go for run through, just so if you're worried that you might not get an ST4 post if you reapply and you compete again nationally. But one of the benefits of doing that is that if you find a deanery that you couldn't match into your first choice of deanery for ACCS, you might be able to match into them when you apply for your ST4 training. A lot of candidates drop out of training after ACCS and after their core training and decide to pursue middle grade roles or leave and go to Australia or New Zealand or pursue other avenues, or sometimes even change specialties. So when there's that switch from core training to higher specialist training, there are more vacancies created. So that is my first question of yours that I'd like to answer. The second one you've asked is, what should I be looking to gain before training starts in August? Well, anything that improves the points that you will have for your application. So any courses you've done like ATLS, ALS, APLS, if you have any publications, if you have done any observerships, or you have how much clinical experience you have. And if you're working in a place where you can be supported, try and do workplace-based assessments. Try and get things signed off, get your competency signed off. And those will be the things that will really help you if you're applying for training. And I hope that that answers your question. Next question is the one that Rizwan you were talking about from Peshawar. So you will not be able to work in the UK without GMC registration. And I think I understand what you're asking about. Programs like the one that the Queen Elizabeth in Birmingham runs, they sponsor your GMC registration. So you don't have to pass a PLAB exam. It's a MTI or medical training initiative for international medical graduates, people who are in training or who have some considerable experience in a particular specialty. Trusts will sponsor their GMC registration by saying, we have interviewed this person and they are coming to the UK on a scholarship to be trained, and they will be going back after a certain amount of time. So I'm involved in the Queen Elizabeth fellowship applications, and by all means, there are others as well. There's Leeds and Derby and other trusts. So that is one way of coming in. Other routes are if you have completed, so if you're doing FRChem intermediate SAQ, you will also have to do MRChem OSCE to get your GMC registration, or you have the option of a PLAB route. So those are your 3 routes of entry to the UK if you're an emergency medicine doctor. So I hope that answers both of the questions. Thank you.
Good. Look, I'm just going to take a very quick turn coming out of the training and the education bit a little bit. Let's lighten up the mood. Starting with you, Zafar. Tell me about your life in the US, being Pakistani, the food, the home, the family, the travel. What is it like? Is it good? Is it good enough to have that greener pasture, as Dr. Yasser said? I mean, yeah. What do you think?
I have to say that the Pakistani food in England is much better than what you'll get in America, except for New York has some good places, but yeah, overall the options and the variety in England were much better. But I enjoy it. I live in Philadelphia, which is a medium to large size city in the northeast of the United States. It's you know, in an hour and a half travel in either direction, I can be in New York City or Washington D.C. So it's a very easy place to live. You know, there's direct flights from here to England, and via Doha, I can be in Karachi if I wanted to. So there's ease of access here. I like the East Coast because it's very much more European feel to it than some parts in the United States. So I enjoy the life here, and it's quite an international kind of population here with lots of different cultures and people living in the city. So it's very nice. I find from that standpoint, you know, like the you know, benefit from a well-paying job, and you know, the cost of living isn't too bad, and so it's you can certainly live a comfortable life here if you want to. Other parts of the states, it depends on where you go. You can be in some parts of the states, like the South, where the culture is very different. You can be in the Midwest, where it's also very different, might be more rural, and you might not have a big Pakistani kind of group there. Although, you know, like probably the whole world, we're everywhere really, but some places it's very difficult to find other Pakistani families and things. And depending on the, you know, how you acclimatize to the weather, then, you know, it can be extremely hot or extremely cold. So you have to take that into advice. But, you know, there's enough here that reminds me of, you know, allows us to be, allows us to kind of keep in touch with our kind of culture and roots in terms of, you know, the Pakistani societies that are here. There's cultural events. There's Janoon were here last year for a concert, so so which was great. So, you know, there's enough that I've enjoyed my move here from Pakistan and from England as well. I would say the weather here is a lot better than it was in England too. So there's that aspect as well. The downside is, of course, you know, you're far from you know, if you still have family back in Pakistan, it takes most of the day to travel back to Pakistan. There's a big time difference between here and Pakistan. And, you know, if you have, especially if you have older family that you're caring for, or close to, it's, you know, it's a challenge to go back there. You know, a lot of my family has moved here, but my in-laws still live mostly in Pakistan. And so it's important to kind of make sure that you're in touch with them. And, you know, it's challenging to travel anyway, but especially this past year with COVID restrictions and everything, it's become, the distance becomes even more apparent. And so, you know, there is that downside as well for living overseas. And I think some of the folk like Yasser living in Middle East, it's a lot easier to travel back to Pakistan. But for us from the States, probably same from Australia and Canada, it takes a lot of planning to get up and go.
I completely agree, and I concur. And bringing on to Yasir Bhai, you are one of the, I think, one of the group of physicians who are Western trained and then by choice have gone to Middle East. And to my understanding, it's mainly for financial reasons or financial gains for a short-term benefit, or for Islamic reasons, the Azhar benefit, or being close to the country. These are the three main reasons any IMG who's not westernized would consider that. Look, I've got a young family, I want them to be raised in Islamic situation, and I want to earn good money. UK is not offering that much of a good money. But tell me, I mean, having worked in both the systems, what differences do you find, and do you think that it's worthy of making that shift from the Western system, purely Western system, to now new Middle East ground in terms of all the social aspects and benefits and pros and cons? What do you think about that?
Right. Firstly, I must say that till this COVID era is over, people who are already well settled do not try to be thinking of moving. So wherever you are settled, try to enjoy where you are. That's one thing. However, coming back to the interesting way that you started the question with respect to the options and the choices for moving to the Middle East, although I made my first move from Pakistan to UK for training and money, moving to Middle East was not because of money. And just to clarify in the minds of people who may think Middle East is a lot of money here, yes, it is tax-free. However, if you know the ways, you can earn as much money back in UK as well, although you end up paying about 44 to 48% tax normally. But through other ways, and Imad would second me on that, you can hit 14 to 15,000 pound, UK pound per month, if you know the ways in UK as well. Okay, and being a doctor, by the way. So money was not the problem, but yes, there are two factors here. One, it's a bit personal, but yes, I don't mind sharing it with the colleagues, aging parents. As Zaf was saying, my parents did not come and visit me in UK for like more than 2 times in the past 15 years I was in UK because of the distance, etc. They are aging now. I need to be near them. And if there was a possibility of having emergency medicine as flourished as it is in the Western country or in the Middle East, I would have gone back to Pakistan. I mean, that's my ultimate thing, to go back to Pakistan. But since emergency medicine is not that flourished now, I mean, still last year, there were only 7 FCPS in emergency medicine. I had to find somewhere in between. And Middle East seems to be nearer to Pakistan, well, nearer to my aging parents, allowing me to practice the emergency medicine as I could. And yes, relatively slightly better money than I was earning back in UK. So hope that summarizes what was the reason for me moving here. My mind was more of a personal, to be nearer to Middle East. And just to share further, that was the reason why I chose King Faisal Specialist Hospital in Jeddah, in Saudi, because this was near Makkah. And my parents would have enjoyed being in Makkah, and they have done for the last 3 years. Alhamdulillah, they've been on a long-term visa. So they've been able to live with me and go out on exit and entry visa. So they are enjoying going to the Makkah and Medina as often as they want till this COVID thing started. But had I moved to Dubai, as many of my colleagues did for the money, as people may put it, my parents wouldn't have loved to go to Ferrari World or anything like that. So it depends on your personal choice, your priorities, what makes you move. Many of my UK white friends, as soon as we had done our fellowship from the College of Emergency Medicine, most of us wanted to move out of UK for certain reasons, having spent 1 or 2 years as consultant there. Most of my white friends moved to Australia. So you may have come across people who are trained in UK, who are working maybe in Australia, but most of the Pakistan and Indian origin friends moved to the Middle East because that was near to India, that was near to Pakistan, to the subcontinent. So we all have family culture values and we want to be near to our parents. If we can't get them to us, we try to be getting near to them. If specialty was flourishing in Pakistan, I would have gone back to Pakistan.
Yeah.
Middle East.
I'll actually do 2 points here. In fact, one is a question for Dr. Jabin. I'll come back to that one. But yes, you're right. Australia seems to be that humble ground between the polarized Western American versus UK versus Canada. And I think Australia is where somewhere a middle ground has been achieved. In the department that I'm working in, Wollongong Hospital, we've got 3 American consultants from New York who are trained in the US, worked there in the US, and now working in Wollongong Hospital Emergency Department. There are about 4 consultants from the UK who've actually done their job and are actually current directors from the UK as well. And then the rest of us, like IMGs, who have come from Pakistan via the UK and all that. So I think the reason for that in Australia is because, firstly, the weather. The weather is beautiful here. It is, it is obviously different to the rest of the country. I'm in summer right now, where most of the other people are enjoying the charms of winter. The other thing is that for the amount of work that you do, you are very well remunerated, and there are options of numeration. You can go whole private, you can go whole public, or you can mix and match. Right now, I'm in a very good balance of working both sort of in a private capacity and a public capacity, and it seems to be working fine. The downside, as Zafar alluded to, it's a distance from Pakistan in terms of traveling. And it's obviously, Australia is not on top priority list for most IMGs. So it's difficult finding people from Pakistan. But having said that, Sydney, where I live, lots of Pakistanis, lots of Lebanese, lots of Muslim people around here. And some of the areas you won't even come across a white person for kilometers on end. So it really is that middle ground. And I would encourage all of you to come and work with me. In Wollongong Hospital, you'll certainly improve your salary, no questions asked, and your lifestyle would be much better because it is not that busy still in here. And the COVID situation, it's a living testament to that. Now, there is a question for Dr. Jabin, that career gap due to family commitments like marriage, kids, how much they affect career, and how to overcome those gaps if anyone is going for any job. And I think that's a very important question. There's lots of IMGs, especially women IMGs, who've been married to these expat people here who've been here for a long time. I won't go into the detail of these Dr. Brides, but this is very much a reality. Dr. Brides are reality. I've seen so many Australian Dr. Brides who are married to non-doctor people, and they are in a limbo, obviously, because they've got now huge career gaps. They cannot get into that workforce stream because they've got career gaps. So how to address that issue, and how can they improve their time more productively?
Think of it is, you cannot change it. You have to, your work is one thing, and then your personal life or your life planning is another thing, and you have to carry both of them together in a very balanced way. So this is, I think, what I perceived through my experience, that having those gaps and then accepting that gap, and then upfront mentioning that what was the reason, and everybody accept that. That is completely a normal thing to say what was the reason of the gap. But then that gap should not be prolonged enough that you cannot justify that. Like, okay, 6 months, 1 year, that is fine. But sometimes I have seen people who have like 5-year gap, and then they said it continued because of their marriage, and then there should be some rationale behind it. What I want to say, definitely everybody's personal situations are different. There should be a rationalization, whatever gap happened. And then if somebody is not able to do some clinical work, I have gap in my career as well, but then I was doing one research project with one or two research project with two of my seniors. And then I said that I had this, my personal situation, but I did not completely go out of it. And I continue to doing that research work. And in a way, there's a gap, but it's not as a gap. And then in between, if you continue to get some experience, even in ways like community service, in some health education, in any way, which has a connection to your medical field or your interest that you will develop during your med school, I think that is valuable and it should be mentioned, which we all sometimes forget to acknowledge and forget to mention in our CVs.
That's good. And I think that's kind of, you've actually summarized it quite well, that even in Western cultures, there's, a maternity leave, which is about 6 months to a year. So you can justify that easily. Look, I was married and I had a young family, but being involved in courses, research is just so important. Last question, thank you guys for being patient, is would you ever go back to Pakistan? Yasser, what do you think? You seems to be the most closest to Pakistan right now. We'll start from you.
I partially answered this
Geographically.
question before. Like, if emergency medicine was more existent there, yes, I would have gone to Pakistan rather than come to Saudi, because we should not
But what
forget our
about the
roots.
money? What about the money? You will take a serious hit in terms of your earning capacity. Do you think that having worked and trained in the UK, you've accumulated enough wealth and assets that you can support your family, your parents who are aged now, and be able to enjoy the professionalism and professional gratification? Do you not think about that challenge?
Well, that can be taken. It can vary from a person's experience and how one is taken by the employing organizations back in Pakistan. I know of a couple of colleagues who went from UK to the KPK area of Pakistan, where they had established some emergency medicine posts through a government private setup, and they were being paid a good amount of money with respect to the purchasing power of money in Pakistan. So yes, you will not be hitting 15,000 pound worth or in Pakistan. Definitely, you can't imagine that. But if you are in your own country, you are with friends and family, you are with your aging parents where they enjoy to be with their relatives with a decent amount of money, I think that is the best place to be. You will not be a second grade citizen. Whether I was in UK or in Saudi right now, I would never be a first grade citizen at all. This is one point that IMGs should realize. It's a very practical aspect. You can overcome it, you can continue to live with it, but it will haunt you at certain points, at certain stages in your career, where others will be given preference over you. In Pakistan, having been abroad, away from my own country for a long time, yes, many of my colleagues would be my competitors right now, and they may want to not have me there, having had foreign qualifications, which has been some issues as well of going back to
It is a
Pakistan.
real issue. It is a real issue.
Not that I have not
I
tried.
think
I've tried there before, but I've met with some serious hindrance. So they are happy
yes.
for me to come and teach over there. I'm part of this teaching program at the Indus Hospital. MashaAllah, they've got this 1 year certificate program in emergency medicine training for 1 year. So as a faculty, you can go there for a month and teach there. And try to deliver back to Pakistan. Maybe any of you would have been part of it as well. Now I'm doing it online because of the COVID. So doing that, you guys have done it in Pakistan, delivered this through the emergency focus workshops and trying to give back to Pakistan. But to try to get a post there, it will be difficult because people who have become the pioneers of emergency medicine there through grandfather clause, I mean, the ones who are testing for the fellowship of emergency medicine exam are themselves not fellows. They are either acute medicine or surgery or orthopedics. They wouldn't want you to be there because obviously you would be overqualified from them in terms of training, in terms of fellowship. So yes, it's going to be a bit difficult, but it is in the plan. I hope one day in the next couple of years, maybe few years or so, I might want to settle back there. The other one thing that I must consider, and I must tell and discuss with our IMGs as well, if you have lived most of your life abroad, especially with a married life and have your children abroad, do not expect them to be having the same amount of love and want to go back to the country as you might feel, because they were never born there. We think if they are born in a Pakistani family or in an Iraqi family or a Middle Eastern family, if you take them back to Pakistan, India, or Saudi or Bahrain, they will settle there. No, it's not that. I have 3 children who were born and bred in UK. Well, the first one was born in Pakistan, but all 3 were raised there. They think in a British way. One of the reasons why I moved here, as in answer to your last question, yes, it was for some Islamic values as well, because they are all teenagers now. And I didn't want them to flourish in that Western culture to which I could not adapt to, despite my earlier remark that we should try to adapt, but not to a certain extent. So I had to bring them back. If I think I can take them back to Pakistan, I think I'll be wrong to say that. So yes, once they are in universities, they are in their own professional careers, and it's just me and my wife, I'll be happy to go back to Pakistan and be in my own country to return back what I got from it. But I can't expect that my whole family, my children would go back there, because they don't have the love, they don't have the enthusiasm to go back to the country where they love to visit as a holiday, but not as a place to live in.
That's right. There's
That
two
might
different
be
things entirely.
Sudan for you, that might be Iraq or Egypt or Bahrain or India. I think it applies the same. Children who are born abroad are abroad. And Zaf I have met families there with children who are born in US. They are US. They think American. They can't think Pakistani. They will not understand why you have tears in your eyes when you listen to the national anthem on the national day. They wouldn't understand why we like listening to the other talk shows also. So this cultural divide has become worse in our second generation.
I
don't want to.
understand. I completely understand that. That's so. Let's put a question to Imad. Say, for instance, you've been offered a job at a prestigious teaching hospital, which is the largest tertiary trauma center in Pakistan, in Islamabad, or closer to your home family. Would you move now that you've completed your fellowship, Imad? Would you
In
go
the
back to
snap
Pakistan?
of a finger,
Okay.
I would
All
move
right.
tomorrow and start working the day after.
Okay. 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 And why would you do that?
Why would I do that? I guess part of it comes back to what my motivations were for choosing emergency medicine as a field. If you remember that little story of the poor Saudi elderly gentleman who died of fluid overload. So how long am I going to continue training people to look after people who, obviously deserve great care, but they've got plenty of others to do that training for them. Somebody's got to take that initiative. Somebody has got to step back. Somebody has to go back home and help improve the system, help improve. So what Yasir Bhai is saying, I completely understand. If emergency medicine was well enough in Pakistan, he would come back. I want to be the person who goes back and makes it well enough for Yasir Bhai to come back.
So why have you not done that so far?
Why have I not done that so far? That is a very good question. So obviously, there are things like this. Obviously you need time to plan these things. When I say I would go back in the snap of a finger, I absolutely do mean that. But you have to look at what the family situation is. You've got to look at where your parents are. You've got to look at your immigration status as well. So with all of those things, when I look at it, I'm probably not there right now to be able to go back. Plus, there isn't a job opportunity that of the type that you're talking about, Rizwan. Although I have been offered a few jobs in Pakistan, and I have asked them to put them on hold and just wait for a bit. One big thing that I'm waiting for is for my father to retire, because he's not in Pakistan. So, like when you said going back to Pakistan, you'll be closer to home. But actually, my parents are in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. So I'm waiting for my father to retire as well. And then for him to decide where he wants to spend the rest of his life, whether that's still in the Middle East, or if he'd like to move to Australia, to Sydney, where my younger brother is, or if he'd like to come to the UK. I don't know why he would want to, or if he'd like to go back to Pakistan. So that's one big factor that's holding me back. I don't want to have to move my family 2 or 3 times in quick succession. Then secondly, like I said, my immigration status at the moment and my is something that I'm bound to the UK for at least another 6 months to a year. And obviously, if you want to go back to Pakistan with this intention that you want to help develop the system, then you've got to have that credibility behind you. You've got to have completed everything you wanted to complete here to take back with you. So yes, I've done my FRChem. I've become an associate fellow of the intensive care medicine faculty. But there are other things that I still need to get done. I still need to get some medical education qualifications, because that is one big thing that is going to be needed if I go back to Pakistan. It has to be a teaching hospital. It has to be either a fellowship or a master's degree or something in medical education. I'm doing a lot of simulation work, but I think that like Jabin has done a fellowship in simulation, something like that. So I haven't completed all of my, I haven't gotten my CV to the point where if I go to Pakistan, I can make emergency medicine in Pakistan to the level where Yasir Bhai and Zafar Bhai and you will come back.
I think the point that Dr. Yasir made was very relevant. There are people who are working in emergency medicine who are not even emergency medicine qualified. They've actually just taken up the reins of the college by a grandfather clause. So in your capacity, Imad, you're way above that qualification by default. So if you decide, whenever you decide, you will already be making strides of change. Zafar, what do you think? What about you? You're the
Yes,
farthest, both
it's a
culturally
consistent. Yeah,
and
it's
from establishment. And I think from my understanding, and I might be a completely wrong person to imagine that, I might be prejudiced in thinking about that. The people who actually go over to the US, there's a very few people who actually return back to Pakistan. They do return. There are some faculty members in Khan, but they try to return to an area where they're very comfortable with a similar kind of system. They won't take experiment into, going into a government sector hospital, or at least not in a majority. What's your thought? Would you ever return back to Pakistan, or?
Yeah, I think it's a good question to ask. And if you'd asked me 8-9 years ago, my answer would have been different. I was actually, I was finishing my training in England, and I was seriously contemplating a job. At the time, Dr. Junaid was there at Aga Khan, and he was saying, "Come and join me," because it was quite a dynamic time there. So it was, would have been a really interesting time to go. But the biggest reason driving that was that my father was there and his health was declining and stuff. And so that was a really kind of big driver for me to kind of consider going there, even though, I was living a very comfortable life in England, and, the salary and security and all that stuff was much better in England. But that was but then, it's been 8-9 years now that he's died. And so, my sister lives here in the States, and my mother's immigrated to the States as well. And importantly, my wife has, she has a career and stuff here as well. So that's a very important aspect to take into account, before you make a big decision to go back. But if you do go back, I think that people who succeed do so in, the people have traditionally kind of succeeded going back from abroad in the more traditional specialties, medicine or surgery or one of the subspecialties, especially procedural specialties where they're able to kind of set up their thing. They usually probably end up going in their 30s when they're kind of able to dynamically fit into and have the energy to kind of establish a word of mouth base for themselves, so they get a patient base. And then so it's kind of going as an emergency physician is I think a lot more challenging, because inevitably you have to work in a hospital if you're working in the emergency department. So you can't just set up a clinic somewhere and do that. So the reality is you need to be in a hospital, and there's only a limited number of places where you can go. And as Yasir said, the salary is, sure, it's going to be different, but the cost of living is very different there. And, there's other benefits that are intangible that, you can, if you wanted to, you could make a very nice life for yourself there. But if you wanted, one, to get the job that you needed to work in an emergency department, that's very limited options in Pakistan right now. And two, also the significant challenges and frustrations that you face, especially someone who's spent last 10 years abroad, 15 years abroad, and is now coming in. There's still very much I'll say this, almost a patriarchal kind of society still in medicine in Pakistan, where the senior folk may unnecessarily put limits on what you can do, unless you're truly like a Dr. Junaid or someone like that who has that vision and that energy and that kind of drive to be able to implement change, because it is.
You mean Junaid Razak?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
It's
yes.
and it's
and
not,
we do know that he's back in he's back in Johns
He
Hopkins.
is, yeah, and he has his own reasons for being back, but he was there for a number of years, and in his short time there, or relatively short time there, it was,
He
he
did a
made
lot. I
strides
agree.
because of who he is, and so that type of personality, especially in a brand new specialty like that, is really important. So I would applaud anybody who goes back and takes those challenges on head on. But at the same time, you have to understand within yourself that it's one thing to want to do it, but also to be able to face those unique challenges that are in Pakistan as well. Does take an energy and things. And maybe, when there's, 20, 30 people who've done all their postgraduate stuff here or established here, and then they decide to go back en masse and, achieve change, that's a whole different landscape to right now. And maybe if you ask me 10 years from now, maybe my answer will be different. But right now, I think there's significant hurdles and challenges, and then personal issues as well that are keeping me here for now. But and that's what each person has to address. And I don't think, some people say, you could do so much by coming back to Pakistan, etc. And what are you doing? Why are you serving the people in the West, so to speak?
Yeah.
But it's a much more it's not a simple answer, and everybody, I don't think you should really be judgmental of why somebody decides to go back and why somebody decides to stay. Everybody has a very complex and personal reason to it. Even though I'm here, I've looked at different avenues where I can try and make a difference in teaching. We do the Apna Merit thing, for example. There's the Indus teaching that Yasir does, and everybody else is involved with different things. Just this forum that you're running yourself, Rizwan, has helped countless people as well. So, even if you aren't physically there, I think there's other ways that you can still kind of keep in touch and contribute and help develop something on a more longitudinal basis than having to physically be there in the country.
That's true. And I agree with you all. Jabin, do you have to add anything to it, or?
No, I think I agree with everyone. It is kind of, I will be, if today somebody asks me to go back, I will want to stay in touch in terms of any help that they require in developing education. But going physically right now there, I don't feel like if Emerge does not have a lot of opportunity, then pediatric emergency is still in a very, very, very infancy. And I don't I have explored that when I was doing my fellowship, and I don't know what was my second year will look like. So, but any enough opportunity that will interest me to go back and do something of my interest.
Absolutely. And look, I think there are two main issues. In terms of helping back Pakistan, we can either be a mainstream doctor going back, helping the patients directly, being involved in the clinical care. And the other stream, which we are all doing in our own sort of capacity, is by influencing, by training the trainers. I think there is also there's also a bit of an issue in terms of how much help is actually required by the people there. As you yourself said, Zaf, the people say that yes, you can make so many changes, but when you talk about the real changes on the floor, there's almost a bit of resistance that you feel that, oh no, that's not how we do things here, and you cannot do things like that. So you're almost considered an outsider, that here I am compromising in so many things. There's been countless examples of actually people trying to make a shift, and that they've not lasted for a very long time. So for these very specific reasons, it's not about, I think when people come to this term that they want to move over, they've already made that decision that I'm not going there for money, I'm going there for the service of the people. But when you are met with hindrance or certain level of polarization from the people to facilitate your service kind of thing, then you say that, look, I've compromised way too much on my front, and I think it's not worth. And I think that's the common ground which we all feel, that it's not about the money. Money is not a major influencer, because you can still have certain remuneration to live there comfortably with savings, whatever. It's about the behavior of the people, patients included. Don't get me wrong, patients included, that it would not be a smooth landing. And we've seen people. There were Dr. Alamgir Qureshi, which we worked together. He was working in South City Hospital. He left. There have been a couple of other people who've gone to Pakistan and then left again. And I think every one of us would like to have this security here. Let's get the passport here first. So if I have to go back, then at least I've got that avenue. Let's just not make that hurried decision. I've not got a passport. If things don't come out the way that I expect, as Imad was saying, that I have still got to finish up on few of the projects, then I need to still be able to come back and come to my savior ground. So that's quite real, and that's completely acceptable. It's not a single answer, it's a multifactorial. Your family members, your kids may not need that. But I think that's about it, really. Thank you very much for such an insightful and a deep rooted issues that we've talked over openly and candidly. And I think the participants may have been able to sort of reflect and get any of that. I would like to get any of the participants, especially on the Zoom, if they've got any questions before we just finish up for the next 5 or 10 minutes. Let's just make them unmute and ask themselves to unmute if they've got any questions for our faculty members in the US, in Canada, in Australia. Then we will take those questions. Otherwise, we'll just wrap it up and have the closing remarks.
Rizwan, I think there are a couple of questions on Facebook as well.
Yeah, please go through.
So one, I think the two of us, or maybe Yasir Bhai as well, would be able to answer, and that is, would somebody who's got a CCT in either emergency medicine or intensive care medicine from the UK have to sit the Australian specialty board exams if they came to Australia? My impression is that they do not.
If they've got a CCT from the UK.
Yes, so they've done FRChem, they've completed training, they bring their certificate of being on the specialist register in the UK to Australia. My understanding is that there's direct equivalence both ways, from Australia to UK and from UK to Australia.
I'm not sure about the Australia to the UK, but from the people who are coming from the UK, they don't have to resit the fellowship exam. That's true. But they would still have to complete a year of supervised training as a registrar, which would very much include, doing the night shifts and having some structured references from the consultant for a period of a year at the registrar level grade, even though you may have completed your CCT, that is certificate of completion of training, in the UK. We've had like about 4 or 5 people come into the program in different hospitals, and they've all gone through the same. The prerequisites of that is very, very small. It's almost like a formality. It's a year of time duration to just make sure that you're safe on the floor. You're not running away from a system because of some professional shortcomings or personal reasons. You're well and truly past that. Because Australia, it seems to be a bit more protective about their own medical system. There have been some bad examples and people who have come from the US and UK who have really not been what they were. So they try to just have a 12-month period of observership, paid, observership. It's not an observership, it's a structured referencing observers, and then finally giving an equivocal accreditation as FACEM. So I hope that answered that question, so what they're alluding to.
And the other question then, just give me a second, sorry.
Mark, can I just add on one thing here, and Jabin might clarify that. Similar to that, there was another question asked on my personal thing, that does it the same apply for the UK CCT to go to Canada? So I think, again, from a UK trained CCT, a person still has to do a observership for a year or a 1.5 year, like depending from province to province. Would you kindly elaborate on that, Jabin?
Yeah, it is basically anybody who has done a training program in US or UK, they have to find a position that is usually called a fellowship. Like most of the people get into that like fellowship position, and it's usually 15 to 18 months. And then there's an assessment process. They go through that. It's a paid time period. and it is counted toward as a training, and they were counted as a junior, like a staff, junior staff or a specialized staff in either in the specialty or subspecialty, and then they go through an assessment process and then they will get their license, similar as Rizwan was explaining.
So thank you.
There's some other question is considering the travel restriction in Australia in this era. I don't know what the question, oh, hang on. As this webinar is for IMG and their overseas career, what are the options to cover gap in practice to meet the recency of practice standards, considering the travel restrictions in Australia in this COVID era? Look, I think that's a very important question, and we've talked at length about these. Yes, you cannot travel. There's restrictions, and all the employers are under the know of that. That you are not allowed to travel back to home country to get recency. People who have been able to get some clinical observership, that does not count towards recency. But having said that, there would not be a hard and fast rule, almost an obligatory rule that you have not done your recency, hence you cannot be given an APRA registration. The APRA registration requiring a recency is considered on case basis. So if you've done your previous recencies and have no longer been able to do your recency this year, then APRA will consider that. As long as you're able to display that you're still engaged in CPD programs, you're trying to compensate, as Jabir said, even though you're at home, by engaging in the programs, courses locally to keep up with that recency prerequisites, which is keeping yourself current. I hope that answers the questions. Anything else?
Just a question as to whether the people should consider completing their CCT before going to Australia, or if they should move to Australia after they finish their foundation year training.
I think we've touched base to a little bit on that you should have some experience before coming to Australia. Coming here as a fresh graduate, you will be up against a steep curve. You will be competing against Australian graduates and the people who are already in the system with a lot more clinical experience. In the recent years, or in the recent months rather, the people who have done well in the system, I was actually talking to recently an IMG who was from Egypt. And he said to me that I got a job immediately within 6 months. And I said, how could that be? Because people are really struggling to find job in Australia. And how were you able to find a registrar job in intensive care unit? He said that I came here, did my AMC1. Then I went back to Egypt and continued working in ICU in a recognized training position. And all of that experience, when the job of ICU was advertised here, that was immediately recognized as a relevant experience, what they required in their job description as an essential criteria. So for me, getting the job after MC1 was not difficult. So my advice to all the people who are considering their first job in Australia is to have as much clinical experience as they can in their own home country. FY1, FY2 is still very good. The people from the UK who are given second preference here would still be having no issues in getting their first job in Australia. But please have your experience consolidated. Finish up your programs, have the completion of foundation programs certificate, and then come to Australia. So you can be hired as a junior registrar or a principal house officer and other thing. And for the record, like there are different states who have increased their budgets. Recently, we had a budget announcement of 5 million Australian dollars in our department. That was for the hiring of 5 registrars, additional registrars on a current registrar, and I think 30 more nurses or something like that. So COVID has opened up opportunity, but then again, this opportunity is not be taken for granted that anybody can come and claim that. You have to still have a relevant experience for that. I hope that sort of summarizes in a way which was the question. I think that's about it, really.
Yeah, I'm going to just allow everybody who's still with us on Zoom to unmute themselves and ask us any questions they have.
Yeah, I already said that. I think nobody has got a question.
Or we've answered all of them.
Yeah. 2 questions. All right, I think team, it's been great, really. And there's
a question in the chat box. According to your expertise, is it possible to specialize in a basic science alongside clinical science? When is it advisable to get a master's degree in a basic science, foundation years, or core training?
I think that's more directed to Imad from the foundation point of view. I think the question is more from the UK.
I don't know, Dr. Bean, are people messaging you only? Because I can't see this message.
Yeah, it is just like there's one candidate who somehow cannot message to the group. She can only, or he can only message me. So I will post it into the everyone in the meeting.
Thank
I
you.
promise, or whatever that candidate will ask, I will post it to everybody.
Okay, so is it possible to specialize in a basic science alongside a clinical science? When is it advisable to get a master's degree in a basic science, foundation year or core training? So the advice for that is you should not, absolutely not do it during your foundation years. Your foundation years are your prime years in which you are learning the system, you are learning how to behave as a doctor, you are getting all those technical and non-technical skills that make you able to look after vast number of patients on multiple wards around the hospital, depending on what specialty you're in, and prioritizing your tasks, keeping patients safe, recognizing emergencies, and that should, in my opinion, should not be divided with the burdens of an academic qualification that you're trying to pursue as well. A lot of people nowadays are doing an FY3 year, which is a year out of program after they finish their foundation training. And in that, they will take on a master's degree in whatever specialty they or whatever subject they would like to choose. And that would be my advice. You can try and do it during core training, or you can do less than full-time training and try and do a degree at that time, or you can take a year out of program and do it then. But I would definitely not recommend doing it during your foundation years. And I think Yasir Bhai might back me up on that.
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to add on to it because before I left UK, I was an education supervisor for the foundation program in our hospital for a couple of trainees. And we had one trainee who was on this program where they were going through the foundation, but they were also part of the research program. So it was like a part-time, or what they used to call LTFT, like a less than full-time training. So the clinical work would be 3 shifts instead of 5 shifts, just to give an example. So the rest of the 2 shifts will be doing some clinical research work at the Manchester University or so. So they'll be finishing their training in a longer time. And also they would not be taken, unfortunately, so nicely by the supervising consultants because they were not considered to be reliable. They were not there when they were needed for the clinical work. They lacked in the presentations. They lacked in the grasp of the clinical knowledge that you are there to learn on the shop floor. I'm talking with respect to emergency medicine. I'm not too sure if it applies to other surgical specialties as well or medical specialties, but it's all about training, hands-on experience that you acquire in the foundation training, apart from the paperwork and medical board rounds and all that stuff. But if you are dedicating part of your time to the research in a basic science during that training, it's going to mess up your mind. So keep it as the rest year, as an F3 year to acquire that training. I hope that adds on to what Imad has already said.
Excellent. I think that's brilliant, guys. Thank you very much for all your time and hard work. That's excellent. Zafar, I owe you an apology.
Just take this opportunity.
Fine. It was interesting.
Because Zafar said that I'll only be here for 1 hour. And we dragged him, all of us.
It's actually very, I enjoyed being part of it. I appreciate, it's an honor to be asked to be part of this panel with my colleagues around the world. And it's interesting to see, what's new, what's up to date now about different parts of this, because, wherever we are, we get asked about, oh, what do you think about Canada or England or this? And it's nice to be able to say, well, I've heard about this, and then actually now I know Jabin or Yasir, and I'll direct you to them, and they can answer your question in a little bit more detail. So I think this is really helpful for my aspect as well, just to learn different systems, plus hopefully provide some information for the audience.
Excellent, excellent.
Yes, I just
you were saying something.
Add, Rizwan, with your permission, if for the benefit of our IMG colleagues or others, if you wouldn't mind introducing about the emergency program, and they are already in this forum. But we've got this
Yes.
whole program workshop planned in the next few months or so, in continuation of what Emergency Focus has been doing over the last 3 years. I mean, it's the third anniversary coming as well. And Imad and Rizwan have been the core founding members. Jabin and I have just jumped onto this ship, finding it so exciting that it delivers so much back to the junior doctors and alleviates and takes away the worries that we had to go through in our earlier years. So there are workshops on medical communication skills. There are on resuscitation skills, CV writing, and all that. I believe Rizwan will be able to, with Imad's help, to elaborate it further. And there will be
Yes.
links on the Emergency Focus website as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So look, the details of all the programs are on emergencyfocus.net. You click on workshops, and all our workshops are in there. And I welcome Dr. Yasir Qureshi and Dr. Jabin Fayyaz. Me and Imad actually both welcome that there are our core faculty delivering these workshop and courses online in the interest of the COVID and the travel restriction. The program that we have announced on our third anniversary is nothing short of sort of a groundbreaking for us. It's called basically it's a clinical orientation, medical coaching, and mentorship program. And it will be conducted by faculty of four: Yasir, Jabin, myself, and Imad. What we have done is a three-tiered approach. Clinical orientation is orientation of the very same issues that we were talking about, the cultural differences, the communication skills. But we're actually making it more relevant by talking about the particular medical cases. So when you go and do a ward round in the hospital setting, when you go and actually do a ward round or review a patient in emergency setting or pediatric ward round, how does that all work out being an IMG? How to make yourself efficient looking after these patients. So that's the medical clinical orientation part of it. It's like virtual clinical observerships, because lots and lots of IMGs were having real trouble finding observerships. And that's not only in Australia, but in the UK. I'm not sure about the US, probably the same as well. The other thing is that we are also helping the IMGs, because one of the feedback from our workshops was that they're not used to the online, this computer system, then the IT software, and some of the application forms specifically ask you if you've got any equivalent experience in terms of IT experience, Microsoft softwares, and Cerner Millennium software. So we are actually going to give you an introduction and training so that you can say that I have been introduced to that software. I know how to do a basic, medical documentation, ordering the investigation, charting the medication. So you're not completely new and taken aback, like, what is this system now? I've got to learn this software in addition to learn how to look after the patients. So that's layering up on to that. The third thing, which is very important and very close to my heart, is 1:1 mentorship. So each one of us, Yasir, Jabin, Rizwan, and Imad, will take IMG as our mentor. And we will be providing them close personal support with their CV, applications, and their interview, and we'll providing them support till they find the job, pretty much. So that very much that guidance which was lacking when we were at that stage, the whole idea is to actually take you under our wings and just look after you till you're able to find that job. So this is our program. It's going to go on for 8 weeks. It is actually complemented by our workshops, which have been going on: medical communication workshop, medical resuscitation workshop, and medical application CV and interview workshop. Sorry, Zafar, I've bored you completely with this detail, but this program actually integrates all those workshops. And there's some physical program that I'm doing in Liverpool Hospital. So if you need any practical experience, we've got approved Australasian College of Emergency Medicine physical workshop, which we can also help to, and there's seats filling and spots filling out for all of them. So if you're thinking about it, please do consider that. It is our third anniversary, and I think we as a team have collectively decided and thought about it. We have finalized the timetable, and I'm actually very excited about it. That once we start, I think it's going to be a game changer for an IMG. This is something which is a real deficiency in the system right now, and we're going to address that with the people who have worked in the Western system through and through, core and core. And I think it will really help them from every approach: medical training, communication, the mentorship for CV and the interview. So I think it's only one program that you need to be enrolled. Anything else is probably just going to help you improve further.
And in addition to that, if any of you feel that you do not need the mentorship or the clinical, the virtual observership, you can also individually enroll to any of our workshops. So those, although they're being run as part of this program, people can just choose what modules they would like to enroll for, or they could just go decide that they want to get some help with their CV and interview skills and just decide to, approach us for that workshop. So that is also an option available to all of you.
Zafar, would you like to talk about your merit program that you've been running? Maybe people may get to know about it and would like to join you.
Yeah, it's relatively new. So APNA is the Association of Pakistani Physicians North American origin. So society comprising mainly US and Canada as well. And they've been actually setting up this merit program to provide focused education, different specialties. Emergency medicine is the latest one that's kind of come online just in the last few months. So what we've been doing, we've collaborated with folk from Pakistan Army and different hospitals around Pakistan. And our initial endeavors are case discussions, which we do via Zoom on every 2 weeks or so, so twice a month. We just had one, so Saturday, so it was Saturday morning for us here, but Saturday night for Australia, midday or evening in Pakistan. And we basically have the local group, the emergency medicine trainees present a case. And there's panelists from different countries around the world that we kind of go through the case with them and then tackle different aspects, discuss guidelines, have a chance for the audience to ask us questions. And so far it's been a pretty positive experience throughout. Everybody's welcome to join in on those sessions via Zoom if they want to. And hopefully we'll kind of continue and expand that as we move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's it. That's all, folks. Thank you very much. And look, we're going to upload this to our pages. And if somebody who's not been able to catch for whatever reason, they can listen to this whole webinar on our page. But I would like to thank Zafar, Yasir Bhai, Jabin, and Imad for putting in at odd hours, late hours, and just being part of that discussion. I think I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not sure about you guys, but I really enjoyed every moment of it. And hopefully we can sort of build up on that and grow on some future audience, but perhaps a bit more short. I think as emergency physician, my attention span has just evaporated and become very short. It was almost like a ward round. I think that said, I'll just probably stop that here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Pleasure to be reliving through our past and sharing our fond memories and experiences.